I think one of the biggest frustrations is I never felt like I didn't have creative control. Like, this is what's interesting. Our whole lives, we hear these stories about fighting for your creative control. And I think that happens in the studio level, obviously. I feel like I thought I was going to be having, for all these years, I thought I was going to be having those battles. And for me, like on Dying to Gunfight, having more money, the battles weren't that. I still had my creative control. The battles were just like, you're just spending so much money a day. I think we were spending like $200,000 a day or something crazy, where I was like, this is it, you just feel it bleed. The money just going to the cranes and the toys and all the things that look cool. But I'm like, I could have made 5 movies. I could have made 5 Animals, which is to me a far superior film.
Welcome to A Cast with No Name. We are your hosts. I'm Jay.
And I'm Matt.
This is episode 52. This episode, we pop our cherry as we conduct our first interview of a real-life independent filmmaker, Collin Schiffli. But first, don't forget to visit our website, acastwithnoname.com, where you can listen to our episode library, comment on episodes, write to our email. Plus, if you like listening to the show, please leave us a review or rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. This will help our show find new listeners. So, as we stated, our guest tonight is independent filmmaker Collin Schiffli. Since graduating in 2009 from Columbia College Chicago with a Bachelor of Arts in Film Directing, Collin worked on various feature films, including as a production assistant on The Dark Knight Rises, while directing several short films ranging in genres from comedy, drama, horror, fantasy, and historical. In 2014, Collin directed his first feature film, Animals, starring David Dastmalchian, which, please, Collin, correct me on my fucking horrible pronunciation of names.
You're like 95% there. It's great.
Awesome. And Kim Shaw. Written by Dastmalchian, Animals focuses on the growing struggles of addiction of a young couple in Chicago. The film was given a special grand jury prize at the 2014 South by Southwest Film Festival, while being awarded Best Director for Schiffli and Best Actor for Dastmalchian at the Midwest Independent Film Festival's BMAs in Chicago, while also taking home top prizes at the Virginia Film Festival and Chicago Critics Film Festival. Collin followed up his debut with 2018's All Creatures Here Below, which received a New York Times Critics pick and rave reviews from Los Angeles Times. The film stars David Dastmalchian and Karen Gillan as a couple on the run seeking refuge in Kansas City. Collin's most recent feature film, Dying to Gunfight, was released in 2021, distributed by Lionsgate, and stars Diego Boneta, Alexandra Daddario, and Justin Chatwin. Collin, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I could talk about movies 24/7, so I'm happy to be here.
Great.
So thank you.
And Collin, just so you know, there's an inside joke for this podcast that Jay is just notorious at fucking up names, and he's not good.
I just go with it until I slur out some random shit that kind of sounds like English, and then we just keep moving. So
yeah,
it's tough.
Why can't everyone be named Kim Shaw, right?
Yeah,
exactly. One
John
syllable.
Smith.
Yeah, piece of cake. But yeah, they're always, even my name's Schiffli. Like most of the time people are like, Skiffli, Skiffle, Schiffle, like, and I'm like, whatever. They can't get Collin right half the time. I'm like, come on, that's easy.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah.
I think we're all used to it.
So I think a good way to start this conversation, Collin, before we get into talking about independent filmmaking and all that good stuff, just growing up, what were your favorite movies and what got you into movies and all that good stuff when you were a little tyke?
Sure. Yeah, I loved, me and my older brother, Brandon, we both were super creative, loved to draw, loved to tell stories. And I think it all came from watching stuff like anything that was hyper creative on TV, like Pee-wee's Playhouse and, Sesame Street and all those things that were just like very visual and like kind of open-minded teaching. And from there, it was anything with puppets and super make-believe type things. Obviously, I know you guys, everyone talks about you mentioned Back to the Future as one of your guys' favorite film. I think Jay, you said that. Movies like that, all that era of Spielberg, Zemeckis, Tim Burton, pretty much ate that stuff up. I think I always say Empire Strikes Back to the Future is my favorite movie because I jokingly can't decide between the two. But those are the two movies that kind of, I think subconsciously, we watched all the time. That and, Return of the Jedi and anything with creatures and creature effects. And believe it or not, a lot of horror movies, I kind of denied it maybe in like high school and stuff, like, oh, horror, that's like lowbrow film when I was going through my pretentious film, phase. But, now looking back, it's like, man, when we'd go to the video store, it's like the first things I wanted to see were all the boxes of like Freddy Krueger and Chucky, and because they were also, imaginative and interesting to look at, even though even that scary, weird feeling that you got when you walk down those aisles of the movies of like, oh, I can't be in this aisle. That kind of was alluring. And I think that's the stuff that, kind of subconsciously and consciously got me into, just wanting to be creative and create stuff and visually interesting stuff.
Yeah. Do you miss those days of walking through like aisles of like video rental stores?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was so great. Like all the feelings and emotions and smells, and it's just all that stuff was so tangible and it's so fascinating. It was like kind of walking through the internet. Like before the internet was there, it was like being in it. You're kind of like had to go find stuff and just see what came of it, and a lot of weird. You stumbled upon a lot of weird, cool stuff.
Right. Were you ever a fan of Fraggle Rock? You're talking about puppets.
Oh, yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Love Fraggle Rock, anything Jim Henson, anything that, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, all that stuff. We just eat that stuff up.
Yeah, I think Labyrinth is one of my favorite. Like, we need to talk about that. Underrated movies that no one talks about.
No one anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one, and it holds up for its uniqueness and its creativity.
So growing up, did you like experiment with short films? You were talking about like Spielberg and that whole era where they would do like 8mm films when they were like 12 or 11. Did you ever dabble into that or? Yeah.
It was really around like second or third grade. Honestly, I remember my dad would like bring home the big 80s VHS camera that he would rent because we didn't even own it at the time at first. He would bring that home for like certain events, like a birthday party or something. And I think around like second or third grade, we started being like, can we like use it? Can we like play with it? And I specifically remember we had like a snow delay and we ended up getting like school off. And I had been like building, I did a lot of Legos and again, anything like that you could build and be creative with. And it kind of dawned on me that I was like, well, how about instead of just like building all this, how about I film it then when it's all complete, try to film something and make a story out of it. And, we would use that camera, the old 80s VHS camera, and just film terrible little stop motion kind of things. And I know a lot of directors kind of start that way because before you realize you can film yourself and your friends, you're like, well, I'll film my toys and, it all looks so cool and imaginative. So that kind of started it. I'd make little videos and that grew to, as we got older, it'd be me and my brothers, and we had a younger brother. We have a younger brother. He's not in the arts. I mean, he's musical and he's got his own talents, but he's never been like a film guy. But we'd pretty much make him, be in our movies because that's all we had at the time. And that kind of
he has
evolved.
to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's like the little brother. We always made him like play like a troll or something ridiculous. Like he was always playing like the most ridiculous characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, and from there we'd learn how to, it's kind of frustrating now because, I mean, it's cool, but, everyone now, we all have cameras in our HD, 4K cameras in our pocket that can do everything. And, we would do like the tape to tape, like I'd film myself talking to myself, we learned how to, I learned a lot of my editing that way. Like we just hook up 2 VCRs and try to create something out of it.
And that was just something you wanted to do, right? It wasn't anything like, did you ever have like when you were a second grader or third grader, like this is what I'm doing. I'm going to get paid to do this when I get older.
I thought that like acting was maybe like, cause you saw the actors. So I was like, they're the one, like, that's what I'm going to do. But I didn't realize that it was the compiling it all together that I was loving. Like that was the stuff. I didn't even care about being on the camera. I just was like wanting to film everything. And, so yeah, I don't know. I kind of just assumed like that's what I was gonna do. Like I didn't know how to get there. No one in my family, like my parents, we were raised normal, like not that this isn't normal, but very like, they were very encouraging of, the arts and stuff. Like luckily our, I think our kindergarten teacher was like, these guys, like, you need to like put them in classes, like to keep exploring some of this stuff. Cause it's not just like, oh, finger painting for fun. Like every kid does. Like we were like kind of obsessive over it.
You're advanced. You guys are like Stephen Hawking of finger painting.
Yes, exactly. Drawing dinosaurs and all that cool stuff. But luckily, no one was ever discouraging. Like my parents and like everyone was always like, all right, like we'll figure it out one step at a time, I guess. I assumed that maybe they thought I would end up like, filming local news or, working, as a graphic designer or something like that.
Sure.
Which was all, there's definitely all options that were kind of in the back of my mind, but I don't know. I just never wavered from just going to keep going, going to keep the next step is whatever. Cause to me, I was going to do it anyways. Like, okay, even if I was doing something else, I'm going to be filming something on the weekend or something because it's fun to me.
Right. Well, I think it was Robin Williams when he accepted his Oscar. It said his dad told him that's great, but have a backup profession like welding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I remember that. I mean, and it's true. Like, it's like, I mean, nowadays I don't know because there's so many. Everyone's getting famous and doing all these crazy things, and you can just sit in your basement and start up a podcast or whatever it is. We kind of have our platforms that we can go. That it could either take off, or even if they don't, it's not like you're not succeeding if you're enjoying it, and doing it. And so it's different now, I guess. But
it's a whole lot different. I mean, because even me and my friends, we used to make, instead of writing term papers in history class, we would do videos and like daisy chaining computers and VCRs together to try and make an edit because we didn't have a video toaster that was $10,000 and the size of a Buick sitting in our basement. We had to get creative, either shoot things in order or whatever, but it was definitely before nonlinear editing. But we were at the age that it was just kind of coming into play. Cause I remember I think it was my senior year, we got an iMac and it had iMovie on it. And that was the first time we experienced nonlinear editing, and it blew our minds as far as what you could do. And I remember being at that age thinking, man, I wish I had this much money so I could go out and buy this and then I could just make movies. And now you have all that technology literally on your phone. And everyone has it and everyone's exposed to it. Like my buddy's daughters make their own short films on their iPad that they get from school. And they're 8 years old, 10 years old. And the amount of technology that everyone
what
has
am I
right
doing
now
with my kids?
I know. They're just consuming the content.
Just consuming the content, man.
Consuming, yeah. That's so true. It's so crazy how, I mean, I'm glad that we kind of learned that, the disciplined version of it, and I'm sure to them, that it's still discipline to them to have to sit and figure all the tools out. And I'm sure obviously the people before us who were splicing film together are like, come on, you can like just plug a VCR in or whatever. Like,
you don't have to develop it.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. So it's always, each generation has their thing, but you're right. We were like in that weird, we have a foot in both worlds kind of, where we got to see the kind of consumer version of those coming into play, where we could actually get our hands on it and do some nonlinear editing and all that. So
Collin, what was the moment? So you're in high school, you decided to go to college. Is that when you decided, this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to, it's soup to nuts, balls to the wall. I'm going to be a filmmaker.
I think it was really like, because I think senior year, I kind of became known as like at Carroll High School as like the video guy, the movie guy. So like, because I was always making movies, and by then I was getting all my friends involved, and we all were like, hey, on a Saturday, let's go shoot this war movie, let's go do this thing. I was always making something, and I started doing a lot of like, the student council videos and the campus life videos, and I was like the go-to, and just like you, Jay, like would do like a English project, and I'd be like, can I like, instead of writing a paper, can I like film for the weekend? And teachers were always like, yeah, go for it. And I actually, they took it seriously and let me do that stuff. And what's funny is I probably spent more time doing that than I would have if I would have just written a paper, but I enjoyed the process more. But I think it was senior year that I kind of having like people come to you and be like, hey, we need this campus life video, we need this thing, or someone outside of school being like, there's a wedding, you know, I started realizing like, wow, I can probably make a living. At least it seemed like it seemed accessible. Right. So yeah, it was that transition into, okay, well, where am I going to college? And for me, I just knew, you know, there's a lot of good, pretty much all my friends were either going to like IU or Purdue or Huntington. And it felt like, for me, I was like, if I'm going to take this seriously and eventually end up in LA, I needed to I needed to branch out. It wasn't even just the school. It was the like going to a Chicago type place to push myself. And we're lucky that Chicago's so close, because I kind of, again, had both. I felt like I was in the big city and being thrown into the chaos, but I also could just come home, 3 hours away. And
yeah, it's right there.
You know,
yeah, smart.
So yeah, so it was a good stepping stone.
Awesome.
What so you chose Columbia College. What do you feel that was the most important thing that you learned while attending that school that you ended up using later on in your profession?
Good question. I feel like it's kind of like learning how to communicate with all different types of people, maybe, because it was a very diverse school, and that was exciting, but also it's challenging because you get a lot of different personalities, and kind of realizing that you have to let go of that. Like, I want to do everything, which we can. A lot of us, again, like we said, with technology and stuff, maybe it's cut out a lot of people, and you can do a lot of it yourself, and that's great. But kind of forcing yourself to learn how to collaborate with people and properly collaborate, and letting go of the wheel a little, and then trusting that person is obsessed with wardrobe. Like, trust their understanding of wardrobe, trust their understanding of lighting, and it kind of takes some pressure off of you. And so it was kind of I feel like that was my biggest takeaway, kind of letting go of some of that angst of like, I want to do it all. And you can still do that, but meeting cool people who can do it better than you. I wish I could go back. If I were to go back and be like, well, focus more on this, I kind of would probably take I took all the classes that I was interested in, like directing, and that's great and all, but I kind of wish I would have taken the ones I wasn't interested in, like production management and producing, like the things that I hated, because I hate the calling up vendors and learn, all the logistical stuff. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the stuff I learned the hard way once I came out to LA, being thrust into it, like, because you don't get to do the creative, ever. Like, I'm on set doing creative stuff so few, times, and it's like, but there's always need for someone to make phone calls and make connections and network and stuff.
Right. And this is a question I wanted to ask you, Collin, before I forget, because I've gotten so many different answers. What does a producer actually do on a movie? What is their, in your estimation, what is their main purpose?
I mean, man, I love and hate producers. If any of them are listening, they know this. They produce. They try to produce. They make things happen. But of course, they don't always have the the creative and the story in mind. Obviously, you have a creative producer that's kind of maybe more your wingman or woman who's helping you make the. It's like, okay, we need a giant club scene here, and well, let's be realistic. Do we want to blow all the money on the club, or do you want to cut corners over here? Or they have someone who's like keeping, walking hand in hand with you because they're looking at the numbers. But then you have like the line producers and the producers who are literally just only looking at the numbers, and they kind of have this car salesman-y vibe about them that are like, they pat you on the back and they're like, oh, you're doing great, but don't you think this is better? And you realize, like, they're not your friend. They just want to save $1,000.
They're that devil on your shoulder that's just waiting.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And it's fine. I'm used to it. But for me, I've always had pretty good experience with producers. But it's just funny how everyone has something else in mind, whether it's the end result of the film or what the goal of the film is beyond just the creative and getting it sold and distributed. And it's kind of, you got to kind of read everyone's thoughts and read between the lines. And you have a lot of different producers. My last movie literally had like 38 producers on it, which is ridiculous. And I mean, I hadn't even met some of them because it's just people who either give a little money here or give some, make something happen over here. And they want their name on the in the credits, and it's like it's fine, but I'm like, I don't even care about credits. I just want to make the movie. Like let's just focus on the movie. But like that's the last thing you talk about for some reason when you're in these meetings with producers. Like you're not even talking about the story ever. You're always just talking about, does it check off this box or that box or whatever.
Right. And I don't want to derail and down in this wormhole too much. So I'll just ask one more thing. Is that all it takes, Collin, to get a credit as a producer, is to make something happen? And what does that even mean? Does it mean like...
I mean, pretty much. Honestly, yeah. Like, especially on independent films, because, suddenly you're like, man, we need that special spot to film, or we need like the camera for a week longer. We can't afford it. So
okay.
like
right.
we know, we know the guy who's gonna hook us up with that girl who has that equipment. So if they're gonna do it for free, okay, give them they might want a producer credit. And some of them are like, some people just don't care about that, but some people specifically want that, and it's just like that's so weird,
So
like,
Entourage is 100% accurate in that standpoint. Like, just give them an executive producer credit and then a no-show.
Yep, absolutely. That's pretty much my experience, at least how it is.
Cool.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So of the three, kind of leaning on the producing side of it and talking about budgets and all that stuff, of your three feature films that you've done, Animals, All Creatures Here Below, and Die in a Gunfight, I mean, I'm assuming each one of those progressed a little bit in budget. What was the budget for each of those, if you don't mind saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice that they're all out. I can like talk about that now. When I'm doing these interviews, like when the movies are coming out, it's always kind of weird. Like I'm like, am I allowed to say yet? Like, because we're still selling it and all. Now it's like, I'm like, that's what I was telling my brother this earlier. I was like, I can finally kind of be candid with some of this stuff because I don't have a movie coming out right now. But yeah, each one is kind of grown in size. That's kind of my plan, just keep getting bigger and bigger, hopefully, to some degree. And my first one, Animals, we shot it for $180,000. And we raised a little more, up to just a little past $200,000 for post-production. So, about $200,000 total to make that movie. And then All Creatures Here Below was $1.2 million, which, was a great jump. That was kind of like my goal, to make like, $1 million film and see what that experience was like. And we can get into that. Like, kind of, it's funny how it's a huge difference, but at the same time, I remember 3 weeks into shooting All Creatures Here Below thinking like, I don't see it on the screen. Mm-hmm. Like I would almost rather it be a $200,000 film because I had so much more freedom, that run and gun feel of being creative and just filming everything. It felt like 1.2 million was just checking off boxes and making sure we had like a proper, trailer for the people, which I get to some degree why we need a little bit of comfort, and you don't want to be putting people through the ringer and all that stuff too hard. But like, yeah, so each one, that was 1.2, and then Die in a Gunfight was 4.5 million. And again, you can see, if you didn't like know that, if you watch the movies, I think you can kind of see where it's being spent.
And you're knocking out all these questions that I already had ahead of time for you.
Cool. That's great.
You talked a little bit about the added freedom that you had doing a 200,000. I was going to say that. Is there some freedoms that you have at lower budgets that you don't have necessarily? I mean, I imagine creative control, the smaller the budget, the more control you have. But are there also, I mean, obviously some benefits as far as, I mean, I noticed between All Creatures Here Below and Animals, I didn't notice so much of a jump as I did between All Creatures Here Below and Die in a Gunfight. That was night and day, because I feel like you did a lot of handheld, a lot of steady cam with the first two features, and then you went into more crane, dolly, and stabilized shots to where it felt, I guess, a little bit more not polished, but structured. Yeah, and to where that I can tell. But I mean, so a little bit more creative freedom with the lower budget. With a larger budget, was there some trade-offs there? Like, what did you enjoy with the larger budget? I mean, was it just cooler toys that you could play with, more time maybe, or was was it just kind of more added stress as far as
Sure.
because you had 38 producers?
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that's a great question. And it's something I constantly am just thinking about when I'm laying in bed at night, when I'm frustrated or whatever it is, when I'm happy about something. It always comes back to that. Like, you know, how far, you know, people ask, would I ever go do like a $200,000 film again? And I would say absolutely, because to me, the freedom that we had, because it's like nobody cared. It felt exactly like it did in high school, where we just had all our stuff. You know, we at least had a camera that looked good. We had great actors. We had the city of Chicago as our backdrop. You know, we had enough to make it feel like at least like a solid indie movie, and it lent itself to, you know, the movie itself is a gritty, kind of that handheld, true running around on, you know, sweaty, grimy world. So it fit the aesthetic. So I got to lean into that. But at the same time, you know, All Creatures Here Below was the same kind of aesthetic and whatnot. So it's like, man, we had 6 times the budget. You would think maybe we'd have more days, maybe we'd have more time. And we didn't. We actually had less days on All Creatures Here Below than we did on Animals. Animals was 23 days. I think All Creatures was 19. The only luxury was, you know, and this is great, like I didn't get paid on Animals. I put some of my own money into that. And we all kind of did it for like, you know, essentially $100 a day sort of thing. And, you know, tons of favors, the exhaustion of running around, like just being like, can we get a church? Can we get a, you know, this car? And you're kind of just wheeling and dealing, and it definitely spreads you thin. Like it divides your mind from the creative a little too much, because you're just hustling. But at the same time, like you just have absolute freedom and you're kind of fearless because you're doing all this stuff, just, you know, rolling up your sleeves and doing it. Whereas on All Creatures Here Below, you know, I got paid a little and everyone got paid what they should be getting paid. And, you know, not like like we had Karen Gillan, who, you know, she's on Jumanji, she went from Jumanji to our movie. Like she agreed to do it for scale and all that sort of thing. So you're still getting favors pulled and whatnot, but it just felt like almost there's more pressure because, yeah, you suddenly have a trailer that costs so much a day to house the actors, and you're like, gosh, we got to get this shot because that trailer needs to be at the next location by this time, and then jumping to die in a gunfight. I think one of the biggest frustrations is I never felt like I didn't have creative control. Like, this is what's interesting. Our whole lives we hear these stories about fighting for your creative control. And I think that happens in the studio level, obviously, you know, when you're hearing about George Lucas, you know, and whoever who had all these great movies, the classics are always the ones where the, you know, executives are pretty much saying no to them and they say they fight anyways, and then they make this amazing movie. It's like, I think those things are happening because they're making decisions on that commercial level, and they need to, you know, appeal to the masses and whatnot. I feel like I thought I was going to be having, you know, for all these years, I thought I was going to be having those battles. And for me, like on Die in a Gunfight, having more money, the battles weren't that. I still had my creative control. The battles were just like, you're just spending so much money a day. You know, I think we were spending like $200,000 a day or something crazy, where I was like, wow, this is it. You just feel it bleed. The money just going to the cranes and the toys and all the things that look cool, but I'm like, I could have made 5 movies. I could have made 5 Animals, which is to me a far superior film, leagues above Die in a Gunfight. I could have made 5 of them, you know, for the price of 1. And yeah, it was cool. It's always fun to have, you know, a bunch of talented cast and crew around you doing this great stuff. But when you're making decisions so fast and you have to move these masses of people to, you know, it's like having a wedding. Like, you want everything to go right. It's all leading up to that day. You're planning and you're trying to check off everything, but you know, you don't. Then it rains or whatever. You just gotta go with the flow and figure it out. The difference, you know, with a movie compared to a wedding is that there's, you know, 23 days in a row that everything has to go right, and you have all these things coming together. And Gunfight, there were just so many moving parts, and
you're laying the tracks down.
Yes,
as the train's going down.
Great. Yes, that's a great metaphor. That's exactly what it is. And having that freedom of like, oh, we don't have money anyways, and we're just winging it, and we're just getting the sunrise while we're doing the scene, versus that crane has to go back. This actor gets on a plane tomorrow. We have like 8 pages to shoot. You know, it's not the luxury of, you know, you hear someone talk on a bigger film, and it's like, man, they have like 100 days to shoot. They half the movies that we see are reshot. Like 50 to 70%
Yeah.
of them are shot. They just go fix it. If the scene's not working, you just go shoot it again. Like,
Right.
yeah, it cost them a fortune, but there's another good phrase that I'm going to butcher it, but it's like never enough money now, but always enough money to reshoot it. It's like we don't have enough money to do it right the first time, but we always have enough money to go fix it later. It's like, well, why didn't we just do it right the first time? And it's because you have all the pieces, and if you don't want your actor to go off on some other show and then you won't be able to get them to come back to do reshoots. Right. So in indie movies, you're stuck with what you got. And on Dying a Gunfight, like we didn't have the luxury of just, I love just to film and roll and roll and roll as much as you can, and you're just kind of getting it almost in a documentary style. Whereas on Gunfight, I had all the movies storyboarded, but I feel like I really had to stick to, like, we only had those 2 shots and that's all we got. We didn't get any other coverage of it, and that's what you get.
I was gonna that kind of goes into the other question, which I was gonna ask about your preparation, to where, because some of the, I make stupid videos for my job every once in a while. So I very rarely the only time I storyboard is, and I stick figures and it looks god awful. But the only time I do that is usually when I'm like crunched for time. And then, but if it's up to me, I try and shoot whatever I can. And then that way I just have better to have it, not need it, not have it kind of a thing, especially with digital, that then I can just kind of pick things. And because when I edit something, it's usually, oh, I wish I had this, which I can go out and get an additional shot if I need it. But most of the time I shoot enough anyways that I can kind of work through. But do you prefer preparing? Like, what do you like to prepare for a shoot? I mean, obviously it depends on budget with your storyboard and everything. Do you prefer that, or do you prefer the other way as far as kind of going with the flow and seeing what happens and finding happy mistakes?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a little of both. Like, I definitely still prepare like crazy. Like, every one of the movies, I drew every single storyboard. Like, on Dying a Gunfight, I literally drew like 750 storyboards. And a lot of that is the luxury of time trying to get a movie going. Once you're trying to raise the money, it takes like 3 years. So in that process, I'm slowly just whittling away at, I start with the important scenes that I need to articulate clearly, like an action scene or something, like a plot scene or something. And then I kind of just, by the end, I somehow have them all done, or they get a little rougher around the edges, as I get to the end. But I like to have them all as prepared as possible, so that on the day we have that, like, we can start from there. And then if something, like you said, capturing a happy accident or lightning in a bottle, or throwing it out completely and be like, you know what, like, I had these 3 shots, we can nail it in this awesome 1 shot, and then I'll get some coverage. And we actually, Dying a Gunfight was the first movie where I had 2 cameras, so we were able to kind of not the whole time, but we had, for selective sequences, we were able to kind of have another camera just picking off different beats and making sure we were getting close-ups of like objects and people picking up objects. And knowing that we had that extra stuff for editing was very comforting. But I'd rather just have 1 camera and be running around rolling like crazy and just getting as much as we can.
So did you have a second unit on Dying a Gunfight, or was it mainly you were still there, you just had a second camera operator kind of picking up some stuff while you guys were getting the main hero shots? Yeah,
it was that. It was some of the, we had a second camera because there was a couple sequences where there's big party scenes, and we just knew we needed to kind of have a second camera just picking up beats, because we wouldn't have time to cover like every single character in the sequence. And that was my challenge on that movie, was learning how to not just have two or three people in a scene, having like 6 people in a scene, and knowing how to, it's funny. And I say this humbly, but like, let's say in theory, I can do that. We can all do that. We can sit there and see every angle and understand how I'm going to cover it. But then on the day of, the chaos of it all and everyone chiming in, and it's just like crazy how you have to just you have to like tune everything out. You have to listen to people, but also learn to be like, it doesn't matter if you're a genius. It's like how well you can communicate to everyone to either shut up or agree with them.
Right.
Yeah. So
and Collin, you shot that during like the whole COVID thing. So is that another reason why it was difficult to kind of get everyone in line? Did you have to follow guidelines and stuff that normally you wouldn't have to?
Well, we actually finished the principal photography before COVID hit, but we had just started editing, and I had this whole master plan in my mind of how to like not fix things, but kind of in my mind kind of get footage. I was just going to be like, hey, we're just going to go film this, a bunch of stuff, kind of as a second unit, kind of the skeleton crew, and kind of patch together what I was not liking about what we shot. And then COVID hit, so I was like, great, we can't do any of that. So I had to like really figure out how to fix it. But the real complications from Dying a Gunfight really came from it was supposed to be twice the budget. It was supposed to be like 8 to 10 million. And I was literally on the ground in Toronto with the impression that it was 8 million. And like 5 weeks out, it got cut in half. So that we were like deleting scenes from the script. Luckily I had the writers there with me. And we were all game to we could have just like pulled out and been like, well, now we're just not going to make the movie at all. Or, it'd already been at this point like 6 years in the making. So I was like, I'm not gonna. I was like, I would rather have a terrible. I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of like a sellout moment. But I was like, I'm here. We're all here. I'd rather have like it might turn out terrible, but it's gonna be an experience, and it's gonna be a movie, and it's gonna be, something's gonna come of it. And my goal at that point was to obviously make something decent, but like also just learn and get the movie distributed by the biggest distributor that we could, at least in my career to date. So, that was my goal.
So that's interesting. So Dying a Gunfight was written as like an $8 to $9 million movie and sort of greenlit as that, and then it got cut in half.
Yeah, like 5 weeks out. It was brutal. Like just getting, like a lot of the movie to me doesn't fully come together right, like because the subplots, what I loved about the movie was all the subplots. And these cool, intricate, very cleverly written subplots, and we kind of just cut them all out. They're there, but they kind of don't make sense, and they're kind of just like a backdrop. And it's fine because again, it's kind of a teen, young adult, action romance. So it's like you can lean on that and be like, oh, look at the colors. It's like eye candy for young people and loud music, and which was the point anyways. But I just missed the nuance. We all the nuance got kind of in one swift stroke got taken away.
Right.
So you said the Dying a Gunfight was 6 years in the making. And were you attached to the story from the very beginning, or how did you come across it? How did you guys find financing for it? Because it got greenlit, but it's still technically an independent film where there's smaller production houses helping you. Like, could you kind of walk us through that process as far as like, what happened in those 6 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. I got All Creatures Here Below and Dying a Gunfight at the same time. Literally, I think I read both scripts like the same weekend. Because we had come off of the, kind of the success, I guess, of Animals, South by Southwest. That kind of opened the door. That was just us piecing together friends and family, anything we could get, scraping money together, just trying to make it happen. South by Southwest happened, which was huge for me, just getting me an agent and getting kind of that credibility to be in a room and with smaller production companies and have that representation. So All Creatures, David Dastmalchian, by the way, close. Dastmalchian.
I got it now.
You got it. You were basically there. You say it all together fast. But Dave, he had done a great job, obviously, on Animals, writing Animals and being in it, but also us teaming up, getting it done went so well that we were like, let's go do another one. And so he had written that, and I read that script, and I was like, okay, this is kind of like a sibling to Animals. It's like our spiritual sequel, and I was like, of course I want to do this. Let's figure out how to get the money. And that was another thing of like, instead of piecing money together, we were like, okay, let's get a producer. Let's get some serious producers who are doing some cool stuff who would be interested in tackling this with us, and just trying to let's use their connections to get, a money person. And we luckily, found a really cool producer that wanted to help get the movie made and help, get us the money. And that kind of just happened overnight in a way. Which was crazy. Like that hasn't happened since. It was literally just suddenly we had $1.2 million like in the bank account, and I was like, this is crazy. I could just take this and run away. Nice. Which would be, you have those crazy thoughts of like, I've never seen this number in a bank account.
Hey, you'd be like another local hero that just recently was arrested from Hollywood.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm so glad I saw both roads and I went the other way.
There you go.
But you're right. That story's crazy.
Doing Animals and having that in the bag, did it make it easier to get funding for your next one?
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the key things. Like doing Animals, it was like me with short films and saying, hey, I went to Columbia. It was hard because we were like, we had nothing. We had nothing to prove. We had to just be like, hey, luckily the story was so good and the story was a true story. And, it had all those pieces that it was like, hey, we're passionate about this. We want to do this. But All Creatures, it was like, because we had a movie to show and we had some, some of the accolades and stuff, it was like, cool, these guys know what they're doing. Maybe they can do it again.
Right.
And then that's where David, again, he always jokes he should be my manager because he he has such great connections. He's an actor, and he's good in a room, and he's amazing,
Sure.
and he has got that charisma. That whereas when I'm in a room, I'm all like fumbly, and I talk with my hands, and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Talking about the creative, of course, and they don't want to hear that. They want to hear like numbers and money, and who's going to be in the movie. And so, anyways, Gunfight came about from Dave was working on Ant-Man. As an actor in it, and he had met a couple of the writers. Those movies obviously all have like 20 people writing on them, and he got to know two on-set writers who were there, like kind of making the decisions on set. Andrew and Gabe are their names. They had written Gunfight a few years before that, and that was kind of the script that gotten their foot in the door like a while back, and basically they were like, got to know Dave, and Dave showed him Animals, and they were like, well, what is this director doing? Like, would he want to read our, we're trying to get a director attached to this. And so I remember Dave, gave me All Creatures, and then also was like, hey, and you should meet these guys. They have a script. So I read that script. And so to me, it was like, well, whichever one goes first, I'll do. And what's funny is, 6 years later, Die in a Gunfight was made, but 3 years later from that point, All Creatures was made. So All Creatures got made first, but I was kind of prepping both. There'd be a month where one was seemed like it was going, and I'd work more on that, and then suddenly the other one would start going, and I'd work more on that. And ultimately, I think All Creatures came together faster just because it was smaller budget, and we kind of were just repeating what we did. Whereas Gunfight, I had to jump through a lot of hoops, meeting like higher up producers and production companies that where the money was going to be coming from. And they, we were kind of put through the ringer, being brought to different locations. Every year, I swear, I went to Romania once where we were going to film. Like, we were set on Romania, then we were set on Montreal, then we were set on Toronto, and then it was Chicago, and then it was back to Toronto, and it was just like a circus of chaos.
Jeez, what was the pre-production budget on this thing?
Well, see, that's a great question, and this is the hardest part, I think, about making it or continuing to do, work in this business is there's no money until the movie starts filming.
Right.
So, like, I obviously got paid the best I've been paid ever on Die in a Gunfight. And it was awesome, but I didn't see a dime until literally we were shooting. So it's like you're doing all this free work, and luckily I didn't pay out of pocket to go to these, to go to Toronto to check it out for a couple weeks and meet the local film office. Like, luckily there's money coming from somewhere there, usually from a producer's pocket, knowing that they were probably going to get reimbursed. But otherwise you're just kind of doing everything. You kind of jump when they say jump, and you're until it all comes together.
So does Dastmalchian get, 10%, 15%? Is that the manager's cut?
Yeah, exactly. It's usually 10%. Luckily, he doesn't take it. I help in other ways, I guess. They have like kids. He's like one of my best friends. So like him and his wife, we're all hanging out, and I'm the weird uncle that comes over and hangs out with his kids and plays video games with them. So that's their payment.
That's cool. Payment enough.
Yeah. Really quick. I mean, if to our listeners, our tens of listeners.
Yes.
If you haven't watched them already, watch Animals. Came out in 2014. It's currently streaming on Pluto TV and Tubi.
Yep.
Watch All Creatures Here Below. Be happy before you start that movie, but watch that. That's streaming, I believe, on Prime. I think Prime
so.
Or Hulu, one of the two.
Yeah.
And then Die in a Gunfight is on Prime or Hulu, one of the other ones. So you can find them streaming. Go watch them, then come back and listen to this. So that way you have some kind of frame of reference to this, because it'll just make it a lot more interesting. Right. Plus, in case we get into spoiler territory later on.
Yes. And I actually watched All Creatures Here Below on Tubi as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, cool. Cool. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So there's a story that Billy Bob Thornton told, was the reason why he wrote Sling Blade is because he wanted an acting opportunity. And the person told him, well, if you want an acting opportunity, write something for yourself and then act in it. So he wrote Sling Blade.
Right.
Is that the reason why David Dastmalchian Jesus.
Yeah.
Dude,
Dastmalchian.
you are on another level
had
with
it.
this.
You're there. That's
I'm
it.
having a stroke. I'll get it right sometime. Was that kind of the driving force of him writing that, or was it more of a story internally that he had to get out, kind of a thing? And I know you're kind of speaking for him in this kind of instance, but I was curious about that because I mean, I know him first and foremost as an actor, and I remember seeing him when I saw The Dark Knight. And he played one of Joker's henchmen.
Yeah.
And I remember him, and his face stuck out to me because he is a very interesting looking person. Like, he just has a very unique look. And I mean, his short performance was phenomenal. But until that point, it wasn't until I think Ant-Man and then Suicide. I mean, and then it just started all coming out to where Animals, with the time that it came out, I was wondering to where if he was kind of driven to kind of give himself something to act in, and then pulled you in because you'd already been working with him on several short films prior.
Sure. So, yeah. No, that's definitely it. I mean, he's I think first and foremost an actor, but he's a great writer, and he's just full of stories that are both, you know, fantastical stories and interesting stories that he hasn't gotten to yet, and part of just his identity of what he likes and enjoys. But then also he's got a multitude of just like heavy things from his life that he's been wanting to express. And I know he always talks about the whole, like, you know, write what you know sort of thing. And that's how he started. But I think there's obviously a little bit, you know, the performer in him, and he's a very theatrical, like kind of performance driven person, even in real life. I love his branding of how he approaches life. It's very theatrical and over the top. And so I think naturally, in the back of his head, you know, doing kind of that sling blade approach of writing something for him where he can be the lead and still embody it. And maybe it's not the traditional lead, but it's something unique and interesting, and where he can transform himself. And I think especially with, you know, with Animals is obviously based on true elements of his life. And I think him and I having worked together enough, and him getting to know me on a level of trust to tackle that movie, you know, telling an honest story that's very heavy in a world that I knew nothing of other than what I saw in, like, you know, Requiem for a Dream and things, you know, movies.
Yeah.
It's like, or Train Spotting or whatever. It's like, okay, how do we do our own thing and make our own version of this? And I think he knew that I took this all really seriously, and we had that honest connection. But yeah, I think part of it is him getting to transform. And I love seeing actors transform, and character actors especially. Like, I hate typecasting, even though sometimes it's great because those actors are great at whatever that thing is. And Dave gets typecast a lot as the weird guy who gets kidnapped, or he's the creepy dude, or he's the Joker's henchman, or whatever it is. But, you know, I full well always know that, you know, he can embody like any character if he wants to. And that's what I think is exciting about the stuff that he writes for himself. And he also knows that he can step back. You know, we had that discussion, like, should he play Jensen in All Creatures Here Below? Does he fit this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's shave your head and do something weird, and, you know, change your clothes and do something crazy, have him gain weight. But we still, you know, he's open to, as a writer, he can separate, you know, the writer and the actor, and kind of and decide if it's right or not.
That kind of goes into my next question, because which I love his walk in All Creatures Here Below. I just like, nice touch. Like, very few times do I notice people changing their gait as far as a character. I just like that touch that he added. But with Animals and All Creatures, both written by David, and he's your lead actor in both films. Like, were there certain challenges or opportunities with your lead actor also being the writer that you kind of had to navigate, even though you guys are great friends and all that stuff? But what are some of the challenges and opportunities working in a relationship like that, to where your lead actor is also the creator of the story, as opposed to Die in a Gunfight, where Diego Boneta is your lead actor, but didn't birth the story? Right.
Yeah. That was my biggest fear going into Animals, especially, aside from it being my first movie and the fact that it was such a heavy movie and based on his life. Like, all these factors, I was like, great, this is a recipe for a train wreck if it all falls apart, because it's so personal. And luckily, it's funny, Dave once we get on set, he kind of he's in actor mode the whole time, and he has full trust. What's great is he doesn't want to be a director, and he says that a lot. Like he doesn't necessarily, he just doesn't look at material that way, and that approach isn't kind of his mindset. So when we're on set, luckily he was full actor mode, and he trusted kind of, where we were going with it. And I think we had talked it to death so much leading up to it that once we were filming, a lot of those things had already been ironed out, like things that we wanted to avoid or things that we didn't see eye to eye on. We kind of knew where, we had a frame of reference of how far to go and where not to go. But yeah, he's able to separate himself. And on All Creatures, literally, we had no issues, no fights. I think we fought like one time, like a brotherly type, or something stupid. Whereas on Animals, we were kind of at each other's throats a lot, in a very constructive way.
Sure.
But on All Creatures, I think we knew it. We had everything down. We had our secondhand, language. He especially separated himself from the material, I feel like, on that one. But it's great to have him right there when you're like, Dave, this isn't working. As the writer, how would you fix this? Or as the actor, how would you look at this sequence and fix this? And to have him right there. Whereas sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no.
Oh no, I was when you mentioned that All Creatures. Did he have in Animals was sort of semi-autobiographical? Was All Creatures, was that, I don't think that was semi-autobiographical. So was there a difference in the way you two worked with each other? With Animals, it being like he's experienced some of these things. With an All Creatures Here Below, I don't think he actually experienced that, but...
Yeah, it was more just his viewpoint growing up in Kansas City, maybe. So I know he experienced it as some of the heavy themes he had experienced on All Creatures, not quite as literal as Animals. Sure. I think that did help on All Creatures to be able to look at it more as a movie with a little more of a plot. Like it had, had like movie plot points happen in that movie that are, where like, okay, like that probably wouldn't happen that way. Whereas on Animals, it was a lot more just we're kind of following these guys around, and things happen, but it's I feel like because it had more of that movie-ish quality, we wanted it to feel real and organic and gritty and natural, but at the same time, we were able to kind of distance ourselves from that such a personal thing. So it made it, it felt a little different in that way. But on Gunfight, it was full like movie, like the whole point of that movie, which again, if you read like critics and stuff, their thoughts on the movie and whatnot, it's frustrating because it's funny how much of the point was missed in terms of like, maybe this is me being like too into myself. And like, we grew up watching directors who they have you see their work and their progression in their work. And I've kind of starting to break that. I'm trying to get rid of that thought process of like, it doesn't work that way anymore. We can't necessarily be a P.T. Anderson where you see how everyone or whoever, Scorsese or whoever, to me, it's almost more like, well, why not just make a bunch of things, and some stuff's going to be cool, some's going to be different. But for me, I wanted Gunfight to be almost a mockery of like all that stuff. It's kind of this tongue in cheek. It's not, if let's say let's say my first two movies were big movies, but filmed exactly how they were, if someone were to review my body of work, I think they would know that clearly Gunfight is a different style compared to the other two. Whereas my true style and what I want to do, the look, is really Animals and All Creatures. Gunfight was supposed to be kind of this dual movie happening where there's like this gritty part and then this kind of polished part happening at the same time. Like Ben's movie, Diego, his character, the lead, through his eyes, he sees his movie as this kind of Tarantino-y, flashy, Romeo and Juliet kind of world. Whereas, that's just the way he sees it. That's me directing it through his character's eyes kind of thing. And a lot of that got lost in how, a long story. But yeah, to me, it was supposed to be kind of Animals mixed with, the part of the movie, him getting beat up in the alley is the gritty Animals world. And then when he gets when he gets to the crazier characters and stuff, it's becoming more of a movie, like with all the movie tropes and the editing and the over the topness and just the polishedness, comic book vibe of it. So that movie was a whole different approach in terms of story and how we were able to, work with how I worked with the actors, and it felt much more movie-ish on purpose. Like, I know that's a weird term. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
No. Touching on that super quick, you had some
Sorry.
anime. Huh?
My laptop just gave way, but I can still hear.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Colin. If you can't see me, I'm still here.
No worries.
All right, we're good.
We have in Die in a Gunfight, you had some animated sequences. And were you involved in the direction of those animated sequences? And if so, how much of that came from storyboards? Because I think I read an article, I was creeping on your Twitter page, and I saw you link to an article that was talking about because of the COVID lockdown, you couldn't do the reshoots you wanted to do. You had to use animated sequences to kind of fill in those places. If you directed those, what challenges did you find directing animated sequences versus live action, and what pros and cons of each?
Sure. Yeah, that came out of necessity of needing more story to the movie. Big pieces missing, and we couldn't film anything. We're like, well, the only people working, are people who can work from a computer and animators and whatnot. And we found a company that was legit. They worked on a ton of stuff. I can't remember everything, but I know one of them was one of the newer Ninja Turtles shows, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, this is kind of the vibe. Our movie had, at that point, we were finished editing. We knew exactly what we needed. And the movie had become so hyper stylized that we're like, well, what are we missing? What other stylization isn't in this movie? And we're like, well, how about animation? And that kind of answered all the questions of what we needed to do, both creatively and also just to get the movie done. And honestly, I loved the entire process of. It's funny. It's kind of dangerous. It kind of gets into that. I know I keep talking about George Lucas. I just relate with a lot of the stories of his frustrations and, growing up, as he was younger making Star Wars and into why he made the prequels, how he made them. You feel like he just, fix it in post sort of thing. I kind of felt I got a taste of that world of, wow, asking for something and then having someone execute it perfectly, and you don't even have to do anything. You just wait around for a week, and they're showing you things. You're like, oh my gosh, it's getting better and better, and now it's all done, and it blew my mind, and it surpassed my expectations, and I didn't have to do anything except for say what I want. So that was the pros of it. Was we're having this incredibly professional team of animators who, someone did the designs, someone did the coloring, someone did the actual animation of it, and basically I found a bunch of like images and some different animations online that I like. I would compile things from online or from Instagram or from everything I could find, and giving a vibe of what we wanted. And I handed it to them, and then they come back with, well, here's the price range. Here's what we can do within that price range. And they kind of just laid out what it would look like. And I was kind of learning how the process, but it just felt like that. What it would feel like in my mind to be a big director, where you just kind of walk in, you stamp something, you're like, that looks good. Can you animate the mouth a little more like this? And I had no notes on anything really, other than like, can we make it just got to fit in this timeline, or it's got to feel like this? And they kind of ran with it, and they were genius with it. It was so fun.
Nice. There's a saying to where you write one movie, you shoot a second one, and you edit a third one. Of your 3 films that you've done so far, what do you feel has stayed most true to the original vision of what you wanted to accomplish? And also, which movie do you feel like detracted most, or kind of had the most transformation during those events?
Sure. Honestly, they're all pretty close. Like in some realm, they're all really close to what I wanted. But I would say that Animals is by far that's like 87% how I want it. Like exactly the look, the feel, knowing with what we had and how we were going to do it from start to finish, it kind of became exactly what I wanted. What's funny is on Animals, we had 3 hours of footage to edit, to play with. Like we shot the first cut of Animals was 3 hours long. So each movie is about 90 minutes. So we literally cut 90 minutes of the movie. So that's one of the reasons why I think that movie works the best for me and became the closest vision, because we cut out 90 minutes of crap, So like right. to the viewer, they don't even know they're like, wow, this is great. But to me, I'm like, oh man, this is a house of cards. But they don't know that, because I mean, every movie is kind of this house of cards that, like, if you pull one thread, it all falls apart. But luckily you guys aren't seeing what's on the, chopping room floor, and you're not seeing all the disasters or what it was supposed to be. But yeah, Animals is pretty much, I think, again, because the world was so gritty and we're just in Chicago, and we're in alleys, we're in the back of a car, all the places kind of, as I imagined them, turned out exactly how I imagined them, and the way it felt as it came together was exactly how I hoped. All Creatures, I just had higher expectations with the way maybe it looked and sounded, just to be a little higher quality, a little less rough around the edges, and it didn't reach that for me. But in terms of story and as what the script was, it's again pretty much exactly what it was. Die in Gunfight is definitely the furthest. I think we nailed a lot of the sequences and whatnot, but like overall it coming together, like, just because we had to strip out so much of the script last minute and kind of wing it, so many things on the day, we had to just like be like, oh, we only had 2 shots, that's it, we had 2 takes to do that. It's like, what? Like, this is absurd. Like, we need like 10 takes of this, and it's just like, well, we only have 2. So it felt almost like I went backwards to, we're in film school, just like, you only get 2 shots each and move on. And it's just like, man. So in a way, that's the furthest, that's like literally like 45% of what I wanted. So, but I learned the most on that one. So I learned so much on, having all the production hurdles to get over.
Mm-hmm. The lighting you talked about in Animals and All Creatures, was that dictated based on, I guess, the budget you guys had and the kind of run and gun nature? I don't know how much running and gunning you did with All Creatures, but it seemed had the similar kind of lighting style with motivated lighting.
Sure.
Or
yeah.
You used a lot of natural lighting.
Yes.
Was that a choice going in, knowing your budget constraints for each, or was it more of a happy accident kind of thing? Like, well, this is what we got to work with, this is how it's going to look kind of a thing?
It was definitely a choice going in. Like, I'm all about natural lighting and realism, and I don't care if I were to get to make a Star Wars movie. Like, to me, I'm all about, I want it to look real. I want things to look, I don't like the way most movies look now with everything so polished and perfect. And again, for Gunfight, it was kind of the whole point of that was almost, I'm kind of making a statement, like going over the top with it, because it's not what I do. And the first 2 movies were definitely a conscious choice. And I'm honestly excited to get a next movie going, because I want to now fuse both of those together, where it can feel a little bigger, but still remaining true to the, authenticity of motivated lighting and just realism, and I want it to feel like, stuff gets on the camera and stuff's in the way, and the camera operator doesn't necessarily know where the characters are going. I don't like when it's all so perfectly executed, like a, Marvel movie or something. It just feels it just gets boring.
Yeah. Just have a little bit brighter than Game of Thrones,
The
Long Night.
Yeah, The Long Night. Yeah.
I for real, I feel like everything now, it's okay if it's all a little brighter, and maybe the sound effects turned down a little bit, and the dialogue turned up a little bit, for sure.
So Collin, you would say you're not a Kubrick-style director?
No, not at all. I honestly get so frustrated. I mean, I of course love Kubrick. I love The Shining. I can find something to love about every filmmaker and something to hate about every filmmaker. But
sure,
to me, I just love when things feel like organic and real, and that feeling of, I just love to say, like, pretend you don't know. I mean, that's why we have a thing, like, we called it like floating. I'd be like, okay, like, just kind of float with the camera. Like if the actor does something different this time, float with it. Just pretend it should be real. It's like, it's okay if you're a little off, and it like that to me just is what feels tangible. And on Gunfight, I had a hard time explaining. Like, literally, we had a union crew on Gunfight, so we had union camera operators, and they're all brilliant, but they also all work on like every WB show that goes in, which is a polished, perfect, thing. So like, I remember one day when we were filming, like, I think one of the actors moved a certain way out of frame, and the operator didn't like follow, and I was like, what, like because that wasn't talked about. It's like, well, it's like, to me, I'm like, just go with it. Just like, I don't care if something explodes, keep rolling, don't cut, like film the explosion and pan to it and pan back. And like, just again,
keep going till cut.
yeah, absolutely. Cause that's how you find those happy accidents. And sometimes when people work on TV and commercials where everything's so perfectly executed beforehand, it's kind of like they're afraid to take those, or maybe not afraid, they just don't know. They don't know what the director wants. So you got to be, it's about me being clear of it's okay, make it feel organic.
How would you say your attitude is, or not, sorry, attitude. How would you feel the set is when you direct? Do you have it more laid back? Is it more like, what's your directing style? Not so much, again, on what's on screen, but more so like, because you have Eastwood, who is known to be super, super laid back to where he doesn't even say action or cut. And then you have people like Kubrick that does 47 takes. And so it's exactly right.
Sure. No, I'm definitely more laid back. Like, I'm super chill. Like, most people don't even know I'm the director. So like, and I honestly take that as a compliment, because like, I'm there to like, because it's fun to me. It's like we're trying to do this artistic thing. I look at it as like painting or something. Like, I love to paint and draw, and like, you kind of, when someone's over your shoulder and you're painting, the whole time they're like, what are you doing? I can't even tell. And then at the end, like, oh, I see it now. And it takes a while. And I feel like if you were standing on set, it's kind of that same feeling of like, okay, what's happening? What's going on? Why is Collin being calm right now and he should be freaking out, or he's freaking out and we're all calm? Like, usually it's pretty calm. Yeah, there's always that like thing of something goes wrong, so there's some miscommunication happening and there's some frustration, but for the most part, it's pretty chill. I like to do like 4 or 5 takes. Usually like the third take's perfect, the fourth one's a bonus, and then we do a fifth one where everything's, we just try stuff. Ideally that's how it is. Or if something's not working, you got to do 15 takes, but knowing that you got to nail the easy stuff in 2 takes or something. But yeah, I'm definitely go with the flow, and I'm almost to go with the flow, because I see, you kind of have 2 lines that you're walking, and you don't want to go too far one way or too far the other, but as long as you stay in between those 2 lines, you let the movie evolve, and I think having a more relaxed set allows for that. And yeah, I'm not loud. I'm not a loud yelling tyrant on set or anything. So, and I'm always open to hearing people's opinions and thoughts.
Have you, you were talked about not getting what you want or not getting what you were looking for. Is there an instance you can think of? I mean, you don't have to name the actor,
sure.
But is there, how do you kind of go about getting what you want from an actor if they're not delivering exactly what you're looking for? Or, I mean, do you guys make compromises? Do you kind of halt things a little bit just to kind of talk it through? What's your process for that? Because it can't be perfect all the time, but.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, luckily if you have great actors, sometimes they just come in and nail it, and you're like, wow, didn't even have to do anything. And that's the best. Oh, it's not always the best, because it's, sometimes you want to play with stuff. But like, for me, it's if it's really getting difficult, then, and you just not, maybe it's for whatever reason, it's just not working on the day. And one thing I'll do is, if it's an actor doing something, opposite of another actor, I'll go to the other actor and say, hey, can you do something to like, maybe say something different, say a different line, and I'll make it so that actor has to react to something, and you get something different. Or what I love to do is, and this is a benefit of having writers around, if, in movies of this size, you can do this. I'll just be like, let's change the lines all around. Let's if I'm really at the end of the rope and I can't get something right, or a line just isn't working and the actor isn't delivering, I love being like, okay, let's do the whole scene without saying the lines. Like, literally have one actor say the lines and the other actor don't give any responses other than with your face and your hands, or their lack of saying lines suddenly gets an awesome look. Or if the line is supposed to be them ignoring, saying something like kind of snarky, and I say don't, and it's not working, I'll be like, how about just do something else? Just don't say anything. Suddenly that actor will like take a drink of their coffee in that line, and it looks like they're like deliberately ignoring them, or whatever it is, comes out even stronger than, So yeah, sometimes it's just getting rid of the dialogue, getting rid of the lines, and trying to just shake it up, really. It's about loosening up the actors and kind of making sure they remember they can react and not just have to be so statically repeating, just saying what they rehearsed.
Are there Are there any barriers, limitations that you kind of encountered that you had to overcome in a creative way? I mean, we kind of already touched on one, to where using the animated sequences for Die in a Gunfight, when you couldn't go back and do reshoots on animals or all creatures. Was there an instance to where like you guys had a roadblock, but then you kind of came up with an interesting way to kind of achieve that vision that you're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, there was a day, just a really simple one, where it's like nobody's fault, but it was pouring down rain for like 2 straight days. And we had a lot of outside stuff. And, you know, part of you is like, cool, let's just go shoot in the rain, you know? And it's like, well, it's not always that easy. You know, it just doesn't like continuity and this and that and your gear. And I remember, I just loved the solution we came up with. There was a day that we were like, well, let's use one production value. Let's try to use some of it, the rain. So we found a bridge, like this big bridge that in a park that no one was around. So it was basically like a bridge that was an overhang that we had all of our crew and gear in, and we put like a kind of a telephoto-y lens on, you know, so that with the camera was under the bridge, and then we put the car and the actors in the rain, and we did it all in kind of like a 2-take sort of thing, 2 different angles from under the bridge. And it's this awesome scene, you know, where it's raining and they're in the car and we're seeing through the rain, and it worked out great. But then we had more to shoot that day, so we were like, well, let's keep using this bridge. So we did another day. It was, I mean, we stayed there, and it was raining still, but we took the car and put it under the bridge, and we just blasted light in, and it looked like a sunny day, you know, and we did a whole nother scene that was supposed to be scheduled on a different day. So it was kind of like this idea of like, you just kind of learn to juggle the scenes and make it work somehow. And to me, that was like an exciting, I remember us all just feeling very accomplished. Like, wow, we did not delay ourselves. We didn't panic. Nothing was ruined. We didn't try to do something crazy, but it all, you know, lended itself both logistically, you know, it worked out, but also on screen. Like it made, oh cool, we had a rainy scene day, you know, that looked like we had a rain machine, and a different type of weather look. So yeah, stuff like that. There's always just every day there's something that you just kind of have to hustle through, problem solve.
So do you enjoy that aspect of filmmaking more, overcoming like a hurdle, or do you enjoy it more when it comes together perfectly?
I kind of do like those hurdles, because in a way it makes everyone trust you, because everyone, like if something goes slightly off, then everyone's a little more hesitant to make no one wants to screw up. No one wants to be the one who like made the decision that day because something was off. So they actually let you be the one who's going to screw up. And you're like, good, I'll make the decision. If it doesn't work, that's my fault. But when everything's going perfectly, then everyone kind of gets like ahead of themselves, gets the cart ahead of the horse, and they're like, kind of forget that they need you or to look to you as the director. So yeah, it kind of keeps them on their feet when things are a little off. And me too, though, you know, but I got to kind of hide that. Right.
And kind of piggyback off of that, and you talked about storyboarding earlier when we were, I don't know, what is it, about a half hour ago. Mm-hmm. So when you're prepping for a movie, what do you think is the most important aspect of preparing that most commonly get overlooked or a filmmaker wouldn't even think about?
I personally think it's knowing the edit in your head ahead of time. Like having the storyboards done in a way that you know exactly where, at the worst case scenario, of course, hopefully you can shoot more and get more than you need and not have to worry about it. But right. Knowing, like, it's so cool to be like, I mean, editing's my main kind of background of like, that's how I pay bills still. That's how I'm always editing. And you save so much in the editing room and you sculpt so much in the editing room. So when you can like say to someone on set, like, I see how this edits because like this is what I deal with 1,000 times. Like, I wish I had that shot. This is that shot that the editor wishes they had. And we just got to get it, you know, like knowing ahead of time how it's going to cut together, just, it saves, because you know how to cover, you know, like I only need one take of that. Let's nail it and move on, or do 2 takes and that's it. Whereas like when you don't really know, you're kind of like, I don't know where will I use this shot? Like, you know which one's the scrap. Because on the day, if you have 5 shots planned, you're probably only going to get 3 or whatever it is. If you have 10 shots, you're going to get 8. So you know, like as an editor, like, oh, I know which 2 to scrap. Those are in the editing room. Those are like bonus shots. I don't need those.
Editing is, I prefer editing more so that like I hate shooting, but I will shoot would prefer to shoot something that I edit, just because then I already know what shots I want to get.
Yes.
And I'm not wasting as much time. But in the instances to where I'll do work for other people, to where they send me footage and then I have to come up with the finished thing, I just hate going through raw footage.
I agree.
And
it's the pain.
finding
It's
stuff.
awful.
And yeah.
That's it. That's exactly it. That's how I feel about it. The editing, especially when you shot it, because when you're filming, like there'll be a look that an actor gives or whatever, that it feels like when we're filming, going through raw footage is what I'm pretending I'm doing when we're filming. We're filming, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm cataloging it as raw footage, and I'm seeing like that's garbage, that's great, I need that. That's a little sub clip I'll put over here, and I'm doing it mentally. And then somehow when you get to editing, you still remember it all for the most part. You somehow it takes you right back to that moment of like, oh yeah, that's that eye look that I wanted. Yep. It's really weird. Or and then you also find bonus stuff where you're like, what was this? Like, this is cool. I thought that was horrible on the day, but ends up being the take that I use. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're absolutely right with that.
So Collin, you've done 3 movies now, and talking about editing and bigger budgets and whatnot. Prior to your first movie, and for most filmmakers that haven't even made a movie yet, what do you think you've learned that maybe you were fearful of before your first one that maybe was kind of an unnecessary fear that maybe an up-and-coming filmmaker has now, that you've learned that you shouldn't really necessarily need to be as fearful of this specific aspect?
I would say this will partially sound like cliche, but like I really mean this. Like, I'm even saying this to myself going into the next movie, especially after 3, because it's like clearly three times in a row this is how it is. Nobody cares. You think everyone cares, like, oh, I gotta please this person. They want nobody cares. At the end of the day, you're the one in the editing room stuck with the footage, and then you're the one who gets like all the blame if it's good or bad. If it's good, everyone jumps on board. If it's bad, everyone abandons you. So either way, it's you at the end of the day. Yeah, in the moment, it might seem like someone cares, but I swear to you, every one of those 38 producers was not present when I was sitting there editing for months. They didn't care. They come in and they look at something once. I think they watched the movie. I don't know. But all the decisions that they wanted to make ahead of time, and you thought it mattered, they don't even remember half of those decisions. You know what I mean? They don't even. So it's always like, don't be fearful of like, yeah, in the moment. I know this sounds a little sneaky, and I don't try to be sneaky. We try to be transparent and upfront, but there's so many times where I'm like, just agree, just say yeah. Like cool, yeah, that works great. Because they won't even remember. They go on to their next 20 projects. Because I'm only on set like every 3 or 4 years. Like some of these people produce like 3 movies a year. It's they jump right into the next one. I'm not. I'm stuck with Die in a Gunfight still. I'm still having the conversations about Die in a Gunfight. Well, they've all made like 3 new movies. So it's like, just don't care. Like, not in a mean, disrespectful way, but in a, go with your gut.
Don't put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
My AV teacher in senior year of high school, he told us, and it's one of the things that stuck with me, was a teacher said, no one is going to care about your project more than you. And he meant that not so much as don't worry about what other people are thinking and stuff. It was more of trying to motivate people. You need to figure out a way to get people motivated and get a passion for your project, because you're going to love it. It's going to be in the world to you, but for other people, they just won't. They won't. Kind of understanding that, but then also when you touched on to where they move on to other things, and a lot of them, they don't even remember the decisions. When I worked as a commercial producer, or a commercial editor, I had a producer that would come in, and she would say, she would come in and just say something to try and own whatever the hell it was I was editing. And she's like, can you change that font size about 2 points? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then she's like, shift it over and kind of redo that. She wouldn't give any kind of specifics. It would just be work on that for a little bit. And then after about the 3rd time she did that, I wouldn't change a damn thing. And I would bring her back in and be like, what do you think of this? Oh yeah, that's much better. And I'm like, get the fuck out. Like,
exactly. That's exactly it. Like, at first you think like, oh, I better do this. And then you start realizing it's just like whether it's a power play or it's just, them having 2 cents, their little stamp on it. But at the end of the day, you're the one doing the work and you're doing it and you know best. So like, just kind of like, that's exactly it. I do that stuff regularly. I literally edit things wrong on purpose. So so that when they give a note, I'm like, great idea. And then I know that's exactly what I was going to do anyways. I just don't, when I do it right the first time, then they have notes. I'm like, well, I can't make it any better than this. Or, you know, like, this is the footage you gave me or whatever it is.
Yeah, you do two alternates, two versions,
Yep.
and you have one that's really good that you know is going to get picked, and then you have the shit one that you're just like, oh yeah, look at this. This is the other one.
Take a look. Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, oh, let me tweak it a little bit, and then you get the good one. You're like, how about this? And like, nailed it. And you're like, oh, okay, good. So yeah, there's all those tricks, and a lot of it is, unfortunately, that's where the ego comes in. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's you know, you got to bring the passion. You got to be the one that gets everyone excited. They're buying into you. They're not really buying into the project. They're buying into you and your excitement for the project. And if you can get those people motivated, then they give money and give their talent and give their time.
So, Collin, do you think there's added pressure? As I know you're going to be doing your fourth movie, but it'll probably be a bigger budget. Do you have any increased pressure whatsoever by having, you know, an increased budget, and maybe you'll work with an actor with even bigger name recognition than you work with already? Like, does that play on your mind at all, or do you just not even think about it?
Now, I did before the third movie, but because Die in a Gunfight was such a crazy learning experience from every angle, in a way, I'm like kind of not, I don't have any fears. I have the fears that of my own of like what I want to do with my career, but like in terms of like all those other things, I also don't care. Because I had way more fear after Animals, because Animals did well and it did the festival stuff and it did all the things that I wanted it to do, and it got bought right away. And I had a lot of fear, like, how do you follow that up? How do you, everything's gonna be bigger. Now I'm like, I was so like, I got so in a way jaded from Die in a Gunfight that I'm kind of like, I almost feel invincible, because I'm like, well, I don't care. Like, there's only up from here. Like, I feel like I hit so many rock bottom moments in Gunfight that now I'm like, well, now I don't have to worry about anything.
So this kind of goes in that line of fear. Now, I mean, when you did Animals as your first movie, and you had John Hurd in your movie, and then you had Karen Gillan in All Creatures, and then you Alexandra Daddario in Die in a Gunfight.
Travis Fimmel.
Pardon?
I love Travis Fimmel.
Yeah.
He's great.
And so did you have any kind of trepidation or uneasiness, like kind of, I guess, almost being a little bit timid as far as directing them? I mean, I'm sure they're all professional, and they probably go in there and they're like, I'm being paid to do a job. This is my job, to give them the best what I can do. But did you have any kind of that fear going in, at least with Animals with John Hurd, and then Karen Gillan when you were stepping up a little bit with All Creatures? And how did you kind of deal with that? Or did it just kind of, by the time you guys got to shooting, you were already had a back and forth? Maybe that kind of put you at ease. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm always a little nervous. I think I found that luckily, they're all professional. They won't be there. They won't accept the job if they're not, you know, the hardest part is really the first time you meet them, convincing them to do, maybe they like the script and they want to meet, or they want to do a Zoom call. And that's kind of the final nail in the coffin of whether they're going to commit or not. If you connect enough in a way there, then everything that follows, you're like, okay, like now everything's based on that conversation. They already agreed to do it. They're getting paid. They're pretty seemingly pretty cool the whole time, and that takes away a lot of your fear, because they do show up and they nail it, and I'm always blown away by how great everyone's been. But yeah, honestly, I think it's a generational thing. I really hope and think that a lot of that stress of like the divas and the, you know, that way of thinking of almost kind of the Me Too movement helped a lot. You know, this idea of just we recognize bullying in the workplace. It's kind of like a lot of that has gone away, I hope, or it feels better at least when you're dealing with like a Karen Gillan, you know, our generation people who are incredibly talented. They show up, they do their stuff, but they also they're not going to pull those things that you've heard a million, you know, all those stories we hear of diva type celebrities, which still exist, obviously, and I
want 1,000 brown M&Ms to fill a brandy glass, or I'm not gonna go on.
I'm
stage.
not showing up. That stuff still obviously exists, and there's variations of it. But I do think a lot of it we see that we can see through that, and I'm hoping that, you know, at this point, me and the people that I'm working with in terms of behind the camera, as we're hiring these actors or whoever, we kind of know like that type of person or someone that would give us that fear or be intimidating. You just don't hire. You don't work with them. You just you get someone who fits your movie, and
Right.
of course, as the movies get bigger, it does come with bigger names and stuff, but.
Sure.
At the same time, that whole landscape of filmmaking is different too. Like, there aren't necessarily movie stars the same way there used to be movie stars. I don't think we're going to have a Tom Cruise anytime soon. I just don't think it doesn't happen. We all have our 15 minutes of fame and it's
Yep.
different. So that helps a lot because that distance between the big screen and us has closed.
Shrunk.
Yeah, it's shrunk. So it's like that
what
takes
did
the fear.
What did Quentin Tarantino just say? Like, Chris Evans isn't a movie star. Captain America is the movie star.
I mean,
the character. It's not the.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like, it feels, in a way, like it's like, yeah, people go see the character. No, it's not like I'm going to see there's a few of them left, like Leo and Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, and obviously we got a handful, but Jennifer Lawrence is maybe those types are kind of the last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kills me when someone says something like that and everyone just jumps on their ass like, "What? Oh, Chris Evans is a movie star." It's like, you're not listening to what he said. He didn't say he wasn't famous. He said people aren't going to the theater to see him, which I 100% agree.
Sure.
No, I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there that probably go see.
And me and you have had this conversation before, Jay. I mean, everyone's going to go see the next Bond movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's playing Bond.
It doesn't matter who's playing it. They're all going to go see it.
Exactly. That's it. I think that's the stuff that's surviving still on the big screen is the stuff that, the material like that.
So I watched All Creatures Here Below last night.
Cool. Thank you.
My wife went to bed afterwards and probably cried herself to sleep.
I'm sorry.
No,
Good. That's what I want.
He's like, yes.
That's exactly the goal.
So, not gonna lie, we were watching it, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen this, go watch this movie so you can so the scene where Karen Gillan, Ruby, is holding the baby in the hotel room, and the housekeeper is knocking on the door, and she thinks that someone's searching for the baby, and the baby's crying, and then she starts pulling the comforter. Which everything in that movie is very, very well acted. You did a great job directing it. I almost noped out of that as soon as it cut away, and I was like, oh, I can't, just because as I've gotten older, I've had a hard time just kind of sticking with that. And I don't know if it was just that paralleled with the cuts to Jensen describing what he and Ruby had to go through getting up, but it was just like a rain of shit in 10 minutes. But that scene when she's holding the baby and you have that sequence to where she accidentally smothers the baby. What is the mood like that on set? Is it, are you guys so desensitized by that point to where it's kind of like, all right, well, let's hold on, let's do it again. And I mean, I imagine emotionally it probably takes, at least for the actors, does the production crew feel that way, or is it so desensitized to the point to where it's just, well, another day, another work? Because if I do something that's like, there's some things that I've done that's funny or that's supposed to be funny, but by the time I write it, I think about it, I shoot it, and it's almost like, okay, I'm doing it, and then I edit it to where it's lost its humor, and I'm starting to edit in varying degrees of funny as opposed to knowing that it's funny, if that makes sense. So I mean, do you still get that emotion, feeling it that the audience is going to feel, or is it more of a subdued environment?
It's funny. It does still feel like that day, especially, I think, because with the baby, because it was a living baby that we had, like, that was a interesting territory of like, okay, the parents are here, everything's safe, we've talked this to death. So it's probably a bad term to use. We've talked about this a lot, and we know some.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. Don't use any of those things. We had talked so much that like we knew the safety of it and how to do it. But there was that day, I do remember, kind of a quietness. It's kind of the idea of when you are filming, we treat it like a closed off set where most people are we kind of get this crew down as small as possible and have the rest of the crew kind of tucked away somewhere else, and we keep it intimate. And I think that by nature, the calmness after having other days that are crazy and, you know, we're all out running around doing things, and then being like, no, this is a quiet day that we're going to tackle this heavy scene. It does lend to you kind of feel a little more. You kind of feel, you know, like, again, with that baby there, you kind of just feel this weird feeling in the pit of your stomach. But even when we were doing stuff on animals with like the heroin scenes, like shooting up scenes, it still all felt, very desensitized in a way that it'd been rehearsed so much. We talked it to death. I keep saying that. We talked
shot
about
it right up.
We shot it right up. It was a feeling of, it was, it just felt very, you make it feel so safe and comfortable that it kind of almost feels mechanical in a way. So there is a little desensitized feeling of it, especially because you're always just racing against the clock. So for some reason, your adrenaline and your stress of racing against the clock to get the scene done kind of trumps the emotion of what you're trying to accomplish and what the viewer is going to be watching. But at the same time, you still feel it, and you feel it in the actors giving their, it takes a toll on the actors to have to cry and put themselves through that. And you don't just jump right into whatever you were talking about.
Yeah.
So on other days you might though. On other days you're kind of like, okay, cut. Okay, wait, what are we getting? Like, and then you say some funny thing, whereas on those days you all kind of have that mindful, melancholy kind of attitude, I guess. So yeah, you do feel it, but at the same time, it's so rehearsed that you are a little desensitized, and everyone's just always stressed about time. Everyone's always like, we don't have time to worry. We don't have enough time to feel anything right now.
Was Of Mice and Men in the back of Dastmalchian's. God,
jeez, damn it, David's. You need to get.
Keep it easy, Dave. At least it's D.
Was that in the back of his mind? Because when they were walking, as soon as like when Jensen walked into the room, Ruby was holding the baby, and they were walking through the woods.
Yeah.
I immediately got the Lenny and George feeling, and I turned to my wife. I was like, "Yeah, Lenny's gonna get it." And
absolutely, that's great. That's when I read the script, I was like, man, this is total Steinbeck, vibes, and that's what he was going for. Definitely Of Mice and Men, and I even saw a little like Grapes of Wrath in there, like kind of just that feeling, that desolate, desperate feeling, and absolutely, he wanted to kind of have that almost novel-like approach to it, like a very literature, that feeling.
And I don't know if this was intentional, but I did like that sense to where they went from the highly populated Los Angeles, and then they were just slowly going to that, I guess, blue collar Kansas City environment that, Steinbeck has a lot of that, to where he talked a lot about the working class people, and that's who he wrote about, to where he was just kind of taking them out of the LA diverse culture all the way out to the sticks, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally it. Definitely one of the themes, and one of the things that I enjoyed most about it, coming up with ideas visually and thematically, like that road trip into the sticks, into the heartland.
Collin, for animals, did some of the cons that were done to get money, it seemed very real. Did David participate in any of those cons? Were they inspired by a real event that happened, or was it just a story that he might have heard of?
He definitely, he was involved with a lot of that stuff. A lot of his daily hustles for a while there, living in Chicago in a car with his girlfriend at the time. That was it. Their daily hustle of, all the tricks of like, oh, we're out of gas, and you carry around a gas tank, and and people give you a couple bucks, and you're like, our car's around the corner, those types of things, which actually that happened to us while we were filming. I was like, whoa, like so many things came to, a realization of like how real and how close to home everything was as we were filming. Like people would come up to us and do those little tricks. I'm like, wow, we're filming a scene about, characters that are doing exactly what you guys are doing right now. And it's kind of heartbreaking, but also kind of just, wow, it's like art in life.
Art imitating life.
Yeah. And so, Dave was involved with that. And of course, he obviously put a lot of it into story, things that he had heard and like the dates and stuff. I don't think they participated in that, but they talked about it. They did their own versions of that stuff.
Sure.
And I know at one point the script, was super solid, and he went through so many drafts of that script way before I was involved. There's times where it got way more movie-ish. I know I keep using that term, but like, there's like one of the guys from the dates came back at the end and they crossed paths again, and he had a gun. Things that, again, that's what I mean by like the movie moments that I really wanted to strip out. He had already done that in the script, but I love stripping those things out, like, and just finding. I always say like, okay, this is like the movie version of what that character would wear or what that character would do. Let's like take it back 2 notches. Like, what's the realistic version of that?
Yeah, I appreciated that aspect of the movie, because the very first guy that they tried to con, he just seemed like a normal lonely guy that I was expecting the second guy that they came across who was creepy and saying vulgar shit and was gonna run after her and possibly take advantage of her, and it was just a nice touch that you put that in there, because that's probably most guys lonely,
Very
some
real,
timid guy,
some
probably
timid
scared
guy,
half to death.
Scared half to death to talk to a woman. And all
Oh
that
man,
stuff.
he nailed that scene too. That was one of my favorite. I think that might be my all-time favorite scene filming of any of my movies. It just felt
very
so
good.
Nothing went wrong that day. Everyone was on it. He brought so much to that character, and it felt everyone was just we were just like, it felt like we're chilling in a friend's house filming a scene, just like back in the day.
Nice. And I must say, Colin, I wanted to say this. I think Animals is the first happy ending drug abuse movie that I've ever seen. And I was pleasantly surprised, because I for sure thought that we were going down the Requiem for a Dream route.
Yeah.
I was like,
that's
oh
great.
man, this is going to be rough.
Honestly, that was what I loved about the script. Like, of course I was going to do it no matter what, because it was my first opportunity and he was asking me to do it. But when I read it, I was like, why a heroin movie? We have so many it's like a genre of its own, indie heroin drug movies, and they're always bleak. And then when he said it was all real, and when I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, like there is something kind of unique about this. Like if we nail it, it could be kind of like this kind of, it's like heartbreaking, but still like this cleansing ending, and who knows what happens to them, but you can kind of think what you want of it, and someone doesn't have a crazy tragic death scene, and
it's
it
not
was just
asking
very
else.
And you have
exactly.
Jared Leto losing an arm, and
yes, it avoided all that stuff, but at the same time was kind of unique in its own way, and I think that's why it's kind of refreshing.
And I enjoyed the story ending that way, because it was refreshing to where you thought before they went skinny dipping in the pool, you thought, okay, they're going to try and get high one more time and she's going to relapse and all this other stuff, to where, no, it's just they both kind of understood that if they remained together, it wasn't going to work out for either of them. And it's best if they just stay separate, even though they do love each other. I love that paradox that they experienced, as far as that story goes. So yeah,
I got to say the ending knocked it out of the park. It's very memorable. I loved it. I thought it was very good. Great.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys even just watching, let alone, just hearing discussions about it. Like you'd be surprised how few discussions I get to have about, most people are like, cool, I watched your movie. Great. And that's like it. And it's just like, oh, it's so nice to actually dissect them and talk about them objectively, as movies.
Yeah.
No,
because you ended the movie with them skinny dipping in the water, and the beginning shot of the movie was 2 whales. So I imagine you were equating David and Kim Shaw as whales.
Yeah, there you go.
And you were making that parallel. You were calling them both fat.
I'm calling both fat. That's the real message that goes all over everyone's head. And now we got the whale out here stealing my idea.
It's an obesity film. Heroin is sugar. And high fructose corn syrup.
Right.
It's all a metaphor for the sugar corporation.
Yes.
I also like the whose idea was it? Was it in the script where they were in their Oldsmobile, but I was like, they were in like a hotel or like their apartment, and then it went back into the Oldsmobile. I'm like, oh, this is a nice little creative touch here.
I was all right. So Christy and we had to rewind that.
Yeah.
Because you were confused.
Because we were watching it, and then they're like, wait, what the fuck? They're in the car. And I was like, were they in the car? And then Christy was like, yeah, they were in the car. And I was like, what? And we rewound. I was like, no, he's crawling around all over. That's a massive fucking bed. That's that's the only thing that tripped me up. But
it was a nice touch.
Yeah,
that was very creative. Yeah.
It was in the script that way. It was kind of like this. It was actually much more heavy-handed in the script, like these very almost fantasy-like scenes. And we really just couldn't do it. We were just like, we don't have time and money to do some like fantastic. And I was like, I feel like we've seen that in drug movies, like this kind of
Sure.
other world whimsical. I was like, let's just make it really subtle. They just want to be in an apartment. Like they're just, they're not even, they don't even have the luxury of being in an apartment. Like, and just kind of in a way that, yeah, you're like, wait, are they in? Because they're in and out of motels. Their life must feel that way anyways. It's like they get a little money, so they go to a motel to switch it up and take showers. And it's like, where are they? Like, I feel like they're just such transient people, and you know, just being in a warm bed. It's like, even that's just like did that even happen? Like, I kind of like that weird, we kept it so subtle. That was out of, just necessity of not having time and money and just keeping it simple. And I think it worked better than if we had, more money to do it all fancy.
Yeah. So you were running and gunning with animals, you said, in Chicago. So I imagine you guys didn't necessarily get all the proper permits that may or may not be required. Did you have any of that with All Creatures? Because there was one shot, I think it was toward the beginning when Ruby was walking down the street, and I think it was after she was just let go from the church, or David was being fired, and or Jensen, and she was kind of looking for David, and there was cars passing in the street. Did you guys just kind of, we got a steady cam, we're going to shoot this really quick? Or
on animals, yes, that type of stuff was always like, we'd always like have a building that we had, like our office. We literally had our production office in a spot that we could kind of leapfrog around different alleys, and we were close enough to the office that if anyone came and asked us what we were doing, we could be like, oh, we're over there, and luckily we had never had any issues with it. One time a cop pulled us over because we were filming with the car, and we were just going in a big loop, and we had a fake license plate on it for the movie purposes. And the cop was just like, no, I see you guys. I know what you're doing. I put it out. I put the word out. You're good. Just be safe. Get it done. And super cool about it. No issues. But on All Creatures, because it was a bigger budget, and this is, again, where it kind of, that line of like, I'd rather almost just have less money and do that leapfrog thing and take our chance safely. Obviously, I don't want to be like on train tracks doing something stupid or whatever. But like, to me, like, okay, cool. We're going to shoot in that alley. Then we're going to shoot, on that stairwell. Great. Let's see how much we can get away with. It's like, you can do that in Chicago and Kansas City. You definitely can do that. But because we had, and I loved our producers and I love our team, but we had more money, so everything was done right. Like, we literally had those streets for us for that day or for that hour or whatever. And to me, it was great, but I can feel, as we're editing, as we're shooting, I could just feel the inauthentic kind of vibe creeping in.
So you got, so for example, that scene where Ruby was standing on the corner of the street and a car was passing by, you were cueing the car to go. You were...
Yes, we would be like, just enough. Like, sure, certain cars would sneak through or something. We didn't have full control. Like on Gunfight, we had absolute control over every little thing. And on All Creatures, for the most part, we'd be like, cool, can we just have, so-and-so drive the car by at that point? Because I think I'm going to use that as a cut point. That'll be our out or whatever. But yeah, and I got frustrated because there was like a moment when we were filming that exact scene where this woman, and again, I don't want to exploit this, but it fit our movie, and we're trying to capture this world, and we weren't exploiting these people, but a woman kind of came by on a wheelchair, and she was kind of like, I don't know if she was homeless or what, and she's kind of wheeled through the scene, and in my mind, I was like, gold, this is gold, like this
production
is amazing.
Value.
Yeah, production value, it's so perfect. And I remember like a couple of producers kind of like, no, like she's not, we don't have her, we track her down. We don't have a release for him, blah, blah, blah. And it's just kind of like all those moments would kind of crush me a little, because I'm like, I want that capturing lightning in a bottle, and it's when it's so controlled, like everything just feels fake. It feels like, I'm like, we don't have the money to make this look good. It like doesn't look like a busy street. It doesn't look, something feels off, and that was kind of one of my biggest challenges, and still is, like when something's off and you can't quite put your finger on why it's off. Like maybe it's because there's like just the way the bodies are moving don't feel like real people for some reason, or whatever it is.
I mean, for All Creatures, I think with their handheld the Steadicam shots and all that, I think it maintained that illusion, because I remember watching All Creatures, at least in the beginning, when you guys were in the city in Los Angeles or California, where you guys were shooting. It still kind of felt like you guys were running and gunning a little bit.
Cool.
Good.
But
at the back of my mind, I was thinking probably not, just simply because of Karen Gillan's involved in the movie.
Exactly.
Jennifer Goodwin.
Morrison.
No, Morrison. Yeah, you're right.
And so you had some, I guess, bigger names associated with it, to where I imagine insurance and everything else comes into play, to where it's not going to be, not everyone's agents is going to be signing off on that and saying, yeah, that's okay. So that's the only thing that kind of made me realize it's probably not run and gun, but at least with the technique, the way you shot it, I think it felt the same way that Animals did. It felt very, very similar.
Good. That's
like you
great
said,
to
kind
hear.
of like a sister movie to it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I've never actually had I've never had this discussion. I think about it all the time, and that's it. Like, it was me. I was trying to be like, okay, me and my team, like, how do we all were like, how do we capture that feeling? Because we had to make that feeling. We had to kind of, and a lot of it I hid. You know, when it wasn't, something wasn't working, I hid behind the techniques of, okay, make it more handheld, make it more, put dirty up the frame more, put stuff in the way, shoot through the window, shoot through the car, do something because something wasn't working, and because you're trying to capture that what the when you are running gunning, that feeling of uncontrollable world around you.
Yeah, because when you shot, like when I went from that to Die in a Gunfight, because I immediately watched Die in a Gunfight following All Creatures, and the opening shot of Diego getting the shit kicked out of him on the street, it was like night and day as far as I was like, yep, that street shut down. I was like, exactly. And I could tell immediately. I was like, a lot larger budget, a lot more polished look to it and everything else. So
no. And see, honestly, what I wanted the movie to be, and again, not to get into like what I wanted versus what, or to go on and on about it, but like that, I wanted that alley scene to feel like it could fit into All Creatures or Animals. And then when when Ben's movie kind of starts, then, or his movie moments were more the polished moments, and then we kind of cut back to these moments that were a little less polished, but it was just such a hard, thing to capture it was just such a hard thing to get everyone on the same page, especially when everything was already, because everything got cut in half. I kind of had this panic moment of like, I just want the movie to look bigger budget because it's bigger budget. Right. And I kind of I got wrapped up into my own head about that. Like, okay, let's scrap some of the more rawness and just make it all look good. Which I kind of wish I didn't do.
Do you feel like, but I think at least for me, if I make something, I always learn something from your previous project. And I think everyone does. That's how everyone learns, whether doesn't matter what job you're in. But do you feel like that was the biggest lesson you learned on this movie, as far as what you wanted to take away from it, as far as kind of maybe trying to, I guess, be more mindful as trying to accomplish what you wanted to set out to do, no matter the budget? Because to be honest, I didn't pick up on that when I watched Die in a Gunfight. I guess it wasn't showing the difference between the styles enough for me to pick up on that.
Absolutely.
But I guess what do you feel was the biggest lesson that you took away from Die in a Gunfight?
Yeah, I think it's sticking to one, what you know best, maybe. I mean, that could be a little, like, sometimes a little bit bad advice to follow, because you want to push yourself and try things and whatever. But at the same time, like, knowing your strengths also, and being confident and, I like that handheld kind of, not crazy. I don't want to go nuts with it, but I want things to feel raw and real. Like, you can touch, you can see the atmosphere, you can touch it, you can, it feels gritty and grimy and a little kind of low budget, for a lack of, I want big movie. Like, I love, like, The Dark Knight, bringing up The Dark Knight again, like, it's one of my favorite movies because, it's a big budget movie. But when I saw that movie, it was the first movie I'd ever seen in a long time, at least, that felt like I was like, this doesn't, like, every scene isn't a blue screen. Like, they're actually just in a Chicago office. It almost looks like it's just, there's
scale,
Chicago.
You have spectacle.
Exactly. Yeah. And that has always been what I've wanted. And I feel like, so learning, what I learned is like, stick with what if you want that, go for that. If you want it, if I, you know, and I kind of got wrapped up in the, well, I guess it's a bigger budget movie. I better keep making it look more polished. And it's like, no, I should have instead, like we didn't have enough extras to fill the club. You know, what I should have done is be like, well, let's not shoot in a club. Let's shoot in a weird dive bar. Let's have him meet these, no, there's no studio that is above me saying it's got to be a club. Yeah, there's maybe I would have had a little pushback, but I think everyone would have saw like, you're right. We can't afford, we're going above we're a little over our heads here. Let's tweak this scene to fit the budget. Okay. Let's make it a weird, creepy dive bar that they meet Wayne and Barbie. It would have worked so much better. You know, like I didn't have the foresight or the confidence to be like, in my mind, I still had that studio. I felt like I had a studio above me that's going to be like, no, it needs to look like a big polished WB show studio, you know, club scene, you know, or whatever. I always say WB. That's nothing against CW. I mean, I always say CW. Not that there's anything wrong with like those types of shows, but that's how I know when something looks wrong. I'm like, guys, this looks like a CW show. Let's change that, get rid of that light. Let's make it, you know, or whatever.
And so, yeah, Colin, one thing I wanted to ask you, and maybe it's because you said that you had to cut half the budget, and which means you had to cut some of the script out. Just the tone of dying a gunfight, I was kind of confused. Like, are they going for like Running Scared? You know, the Paul Walker movie. Are they going for a Pulp Fiction here? Are they going for a Guy Ritchie, Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrel type of vibe? And then I didn't know if you just didn't have enough time, or is it just a simple like, well, hey, we had to cut half the script out because, you know, half the budget was gone and we had to make a movie.
Yeah, it's kind of that. It was kind of like, well, this is what we got. Let's just keep going. And because either something or nothing. But yeah, it was definitely supposed to be like, to me, it was supposed to be like this Fight Club world. Ben is in this like Fight Club kind of world, like his man cave, you know, the way they live is a kind of this Fight Club meets, like a Guy Ritchie, you know, or like a Baz Luhrmann kind of, you know, chaotic, over the top. And to me, all that was like Ben's world is like this gritty world that he's trying to create, but in his head, he's seeing this kind of everything's like narration and in freeze frame and all those kind of like bro-y, douchey movies, you know, like in a way one of the reviews is like, I bet I can just smell the Axe body spray all over these filmmakers. And I was just like, gosh, like they're totally like they don't know. In my mind, I wanted them to have the reference of Animals and All Creatures to be like, oh, whereas one critic who I kind of got to know a little, I know you're not supposed to like get to know the critics, I guess, but who is a very kind to my other two films, and he was really cool to talk to. He like kind of saw some weird, interesting thing I was trying to do that I was like, yeah, you're like the only one, and it's because he's the only one that knew my other work, you know. So like, it's like I don't know what half of what didn't turn out right is because you kind of, you know, I wish I had like a big body of work that then all of a sudden it's like, well, what is this movie? Like, you know, that's the whole point. I wanted it to be like, now this movie's like out of left field. And maybe in retrospect, that'll be the case if I can keep making movies and people can look back and be like, well, this is a weird little gem of a weird movie.
Right.
That's colorful and stylized and confusing.
Well, Colin, now that you mention it, that you wanted to have that some scenes with the atmosphere of Animals and All Creatures, and then, but you wanted to also like kind of satirize. I don't know if that's the right word, but satirize like a clean cut movie. And the scene that sticks out to me is when Travis Fimmel and I'm sorry, I can't remember the characters' names off the top of my head, but and Diego, they're waiting outside of Alexandra Daddario's character, and they're in that waiting room area. It's kind of weird. I don't know if it's another room or whatever. And they're trying to antagonize Diego. And there's this weird little like edit where it speeds up the frame really quick. And it's sort of like a Looney Tunes sort of.
Yes.
It's just very out of place. And I'm like, is that intentional or?
Yeah, no, that whole sequence. Is he
fucking with me?
Yeah, that whole sequence is supposed to be just this bizarre like literally cartoony, over the top, you know, kind of just like that's entering the world of Wayne, Travis and
okay,
So yeah, it's a lot of it is just like we were just like just go with it, just do something crazy here because why not? Sure. Like to me, it was like I just got to go all in. Now that the movie's shot, it's like now we just got to go nuts with it and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I know this probably doesn't mean anything coming from us, but I mean, I'm glad you had the balls to like try something different instead of saying, because I mean, I think it's it's one how people just get better, or just people learn new things, because maybe there's something that you did in Dying a Gunfight that you understand better for next time, or whatever. And the only filmmaker I think that just needs to stay the same is Wes Anderson. He can keep making
he can cookie cutter his way through everything. Sure.
But I mean, so you're always, I mean, even when we talk about movies, we shit on some movies, and usually they're studio ones. I mean, I don't think we don't watch too many, because we got to try and get the tens of viewers for our podcast.
Sure.
Right.
There's not a lot of independent movies we talk about, but no, I think just having the balls to do something different, just to give it a shot. I mean, I think a lot of directors, I think, do that from time to. I mean, Scorsese did it with Hugo, and I mean, he kind of fluctuates between mafia and religion films anyways, but
right.
And I feel like Soderbergh is another one that kind of does different things from time to time. But my favorite thing in Dying a Gunfight is when Justin Chatwin, his character goes to kill the informant. Or that, how the camera just kind of sits there, and he just
a great shot.
Slides open the door, goes in there. You don't see anything. Camera just stays there. I liked it. That was my favorite shot.
I'm not gonna lie, when that happened, and I think he killed the other guy who came to the door looking for her with a silencer. The whole time I'm like, it's been an hour in. I'm like, where's all the guns? This is Dying a Gunfight.
I know, right? Seriously, I made the joke, like, let's just cut all the guns out and we'll just call it this, and there will be no gun in the movie. That would be crazy. But I love that you like that scene. That scene is exactly how I imagined it. It's exactly what I wanted. And that whole informant storyline is the subplot that got cut out of the movie, pretty much. Like, there was this very intricate thing where she was having this interview done, and we were gonna film part of it. It was so much more in depth, and that's the storyline I loved, and that payoff of him going to kill her. Like, I love that in the script. So that, I'm just glad, even though it's not full, it doesn't fully make sense, but like seeing him go do that, I'm like, I want this to be exactly how it was, at least the payoff, like, of that moment, and to feel like that, kind of like a, you know, how I would shoot like a Hitchcocky kind of James Bondy kind of scene. And I love that scene, and that was literally the last thing we filmed of that movie, and I remember just being like happy that at least that turned out exactly how I wanted it to turn out, and it was fun to film, and it's kind of like serious and intense. Like, I think it works.
I like how you chose that, because he is crossing that line. It's not glamorized. You don't even see it. You just let your imagination play, but he knows what he's doing, and doesn't really want to do it. But then also the second person he ends up killing, it's just like, he's like, I got to do this again.
I got to do it again. It goes out of control. So no, I'm glad you like it.
So Collin, what other, like, is there any specific genre that you would wish to do, or that you want to do, or are you sticking more indie and drama, action?
I feel like I want to do a little of everything, for sure. Like, I've never wanted to just do one thing. What I really want to do is, like, now take animals, let's say, or all creatures, and just add that, like, high concept time travel element, or that, you know what I mean? I want it to feel exactly like animals, but add the high concept thing to it that also elevates it to a bigger audience and to more playful, you know, whatever. So, like, I love high concept stuff. That's why I love, like, Back to the Future. Like, I think Back to the Future is a perfect movie, and I can watch it over and over and over, and I'm never bored, and I'm never tired, and it's funny, and it's emotional, and it's serious, and it's crazy. It's perfect.
Colin, you were speaking Jay's language. That's Jay's favorite movie.
I'm glad. I know. I see it right there. There you go. I mean, even Wall-E's a masterpiece. But yeah, like, those, I just love, like, the simplicity of a lot of, like, 80s movies that, you know, like Ghostbusters, and, like, we think of them as, like, special effects movies, and they are, but they're not. They're very simple. They're like, you know, because it's just like, I love the idea of, like, some really strong characters, a really good simple plot, and then, like, a couple cool gadgets, you know, that for some reason could be sold as a toy also, and be part of pop culture. So I feel like I do want to make those types of movies, but keep them small, and keep them, like, I don't really want to go do, like, and I'm not saying this just out of, like, to sound jaded or something, but I don't want to make Marvel movies, really. Like, I mean, I'd love to make, like, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, but I'd want to make it, like, gritty and real, and the first 1990 movies is, like, one of my favorite movies, because it's if
great.
you watch that movie, it's like a gritty. Yeah, there's silly stuff in it and still for kids, but it's not. Like, it's also very gritty and looks more raw than the original Batman to me. Like, it looks more like a Scorsese movie than it does and it's because it was an independent film. And so I definitely always want to have that touch, that accessible, emotional, human touch. But hopefully, adding some elements of horror or action or, whatever. And yeah, I'm glad Gunfight got to teach me some lessons of how to approach some of the higher concept stuff.
Yeah. I was going to say, would you ever consider doing a horror movie? Because Jay doesn't like horror movies, but I absolutely...
I like Silence of the Lambs. I like The Conjuring.
I'm a big fan of horror.
There you go. I mean,
like it.
I if it's like an elevated... I mean, right now it's so in, like with Jordan Peele and with, Hereditary and, all these movies are like horror movies, but they're also kind of dramas. And
I mean, I want to say I read somewhere someone just started a production company called Good Fiend or something like that.
Oh yeah, there you go. There's Dave. So I mean, he's all into horror movies, and he's got his comic book. And my brother Brandon, he runs an Instagram called Monster Vision, based on like the TNT Monster Vision from back in the 90s, if you remember that played like back when you could turn on like a movie creature feature marathons and stuff.
Right.
And he has like 40,000 followers on there. And it's like, so it's gotten me into like, we love what I said earlier about how horror movies kind of have this creative, something that I used to look down on. Now I look back and I'm like, wow, they all take such creative risks and do really interesting things. And, I love stuff like The Thing, like John Carpenter's The Thing, and like, Alien.
On lower budgets too.
Yeah, exactly. On lower budgets, doing very creative, it pushes them, makes them do creative stuff, and you can get an audience. People still watch horror movies in droves. So I absolutely want to make, but I definitely want to do it in the style of like Silence of the Lambs or The Shining or something a little more. I mean, I love the first Halloween. I think all those movies are, when they're not just cheesy, schlocky films, which are also fun in their own way, like. If you look at a lot of the original things, they're pretty. There's good indie movies that caught on, the originals usually. So yeah, I think it'd be fun to play in every field.
So I guess I was trying to. My brain skipped 5 different things.
You're good.
I had a small stroke. I saw when I was creeping on your Twitter. You had a picture with Roger Deakins.
Oh, yeah.
The man. And so I wanted to ask, is there anyone, and it doesn't have to be Roger Deakins, but is there anyone you've kind of come across in your past decade of experience, whether they're famous or well-known or not, that has kind of given you a piece of advice that has kind of stuck with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, obviously in college, I had a couple of really good professors that said, just really practical, tangible advice of like, that stuck with me, like ideas of like how to approach a moment when you're facing the pressures of making a movie and all the things and people screaming questions at you and, stuff that like just how to sift through all the noise and stay true, all the typical stuff that a good teacher should do. But really, it's just those little wins to me, like not wins, like getting to meet a Roger Deakins and just having them say anything to you is like, whoa, like it was surreal. Like we went to an event that, was honoring a bunch of different people and him included. And, Dave has gotten to work on a couple of movies that he shot. So, he knows him pretty well. And they invited him to go and Dave was like, do you want to go? And Dave had done a podcast with him. And they had watched Animals and All Creatures in preparation. So I thought, I didn't know Roger Deakins. I thought he was just gonna be like, oh, good to meet you, good job, but he actually they had stuff to say. Like they had watched the films, they like analyzed it, they had questions, cool. He was excited about, one of the movies I'm working on next is kind of speaking of horror, I guess, it's kind of like a thriller, M. Night Shyamalan, like it's kind of like The Village in a way. If I can ever get it off the ground. And he shot The Village and I kind of forgot that. Yeah. And he was like, what are you working on next? And I kind of said, I was like, it's kind of this M. Night Shyamalan kind of vibe and like The Village. And he was kind of like, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. You shot that movie. But just
I
having
want to do
someone
a
like
prison movie next.
yeah, exactly.
Cross through a tunnel of shit.
Exactly. No Country for Old Men. Which all those movies, I love them all. So like, like having someone like him, or like I got to meet, like again, being such a Star Wars fan, got to meet Mark Hamill a few times. So just like hanging out, I got to like swim in his pool, and like we were like kind of cooking out and stuff, and just hearing his stories, and it's just encouraging to be like, wow, like we have this idea of like making it. Oh, I made it because I did this or did that. It's like, no, I'm like, this is it. I'm doing it. We're just, whatever you're doing in the moment is it. Like whether it's, something you're passionate about, as long as you're passionate about it and you're surrounded by these little reminders that like that pinch me self moments of like, I gotta pinch myself because I'm like talking to Luke Skywalker and he's telling me a story about him and Sigourney Weaver like on the set of Alien for some reason. I don't know why he's telling me the story, but I'm listening because it like inspires you. You take that with you and you're like, wow, I'm like in it right now. This is like, we're doing it. And there's a bunch. I always forget them, honestly, until that weird moment when you need it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that time when, so-and-so was at that party. Or, I ran into Travis Fimmel after working with him on Gunfight. I ran into him out here in LA and he kind of shouted at me from his car. And I was like, what are the chances that we just ran into each other? And, those little moments of like, wow, it's a small world and we're all just trying to hustle and make it happen.
So your short films.
Oh, yeah.
You did Johnny Appleseed, and then your most recent one is Boy Mom. We haven't had a chance to watch those, but if someone, say, for aspiring filmmakers, if they happen to listen to this episode and they make a short film, what are some best practices you think as far as length, where to submit it, how to submit it? Like some of these things that a lot of these people, if they don't go to film school, maybe they're not aware of, or anything like that. Is it as easy as just going to a festival's website and following under the submission guidelines or something like that?
Yeah, I think having a plan of where to maybe submit and maybe taking a look ahead of time, like keep it simple. Like obviously shoot big too. Like, okay, cool. Maybe if you want to submit to Sundance, if you want to submit to South by Southwest or whatever, but also like think local. Like nowadays you can do so much just right in your area, and there's so many more outlets and avenues. For me, if I was doing it all over again, or if I had advice, I would be like, make short films that are actually short, make them really short, make them like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, because then people will play them in their festivals. You can get into great short film festivals that specifically highlight that. That's what we did. And no one cares about, like, if someone sends me a link and like, check out my movie and it's 9 minutes, or if someone sends it and it's 3 minutes, I will watch the 3 minute one right then and there. If it's 9 minutes, I'll be like, I'll get to this later. And I'll keep putting it off. And, so I feel like make short films that are short and succinct, and where you're learning, but you're also keeping it simple so that people will want to watch it. And try to get it to film festivals that are designated for short film festivals, and see where you're kind of at with, in your range of how you're doing things. And of course, put things online, if you feel like you want to do that. Like, it's just funny. We weren't a part of that generation of everything we shot, just uploading it immediately and putting it on TikTok or whatever. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think all of it's good practice if you're just constantly doing it. And whether it's literally just you and your phone, or if it's you and your friends, or if it's, that's what blows my mind. Everyone's already doing, just for fun, doing cooler stuff than most big budget commercials, things that I'm like, dang, this is like a 20-second commercial that's incredible, and it's just some kid like in his room or whatever. I'd say it's like just doing it and getting people together to do it, and actually submitting it to things, but being realistic, like knowing that like, Sundance probably won't take your movie, they don't care, like it's stuff like that, and that's okay. Like get it out there some other way, and just have stuff so that when you do try to get a feature going, you're like, hey, look at some of my stuff. Like you can see what I'm doing and where I've progressed, and people can see your work, or how we all kind of check on each other online. We check each other's Twitter, we check have that. I know it's kind of annoying and I hate all that stuff, and my brother helps me a lot with that, Instagram and stuff. But like Justin Chatwin in Gunfight said he agreed to do the movie because his final push was like, because I didn't have time to meet him beforehand. Dave was actually one of the guys who was supposed to play that role, but he was shooting, I think he was shooting Suicide Squad. Anyways, Justin was like, yeah, I looked at your Instagram and I saw that you had all these storyboards and all these cool things on your Instagram. And so I was like, yeah, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing and he's got a couple movies, so I'll do the movie. So like, yeah, just get your stuff out there and in any way you can, because otherwise, what's the point? You know, you can make the best movie ever, and if it's just in your backyard, like your parents watch it, like who cares?
So that kind of leads into this question, Colin. You know, me and Jay, we talk about movies, and we always talk about how different things seem to be nowadays than when we were growing up, and switching over to streaming. And, you know, there's an argument that, you know, theaters are dying, which I really don't agree with. I think theaters aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Sure.
But what's the feeling that you get? What's the state of just movies in general that we're at right now? We always talk about making content for content's sake, and a lot of stuff that comes out nowadays, just, it doesn't feel like there's any real thought into it or creativity or anything like that. It just feels like manufactured garbage that's just kind of stamped out and just thrown out there. Do you get that feeling too, or like where do you think we're headed with this whole thing?
Yeah, it's crazy because I agree. I don't think movie theaters are going anywhere for a while, and I think there always will be a spectacle movie as long as we have the spectacle things. I mean, look, Mario, the new Mario movie, like there you go. Like,
great, by the way.
If you have the audience and that's crushing it, and you do it right, I guess, like then people will see it. But yeah, you're right. I have trouble with all the. It's just there's so much content. It's like how do you decipher what's what? And you know, so many things are great. Like obviously, there's a lot of everything's in TV now. Everyone wants episodic stuff so they can binge watch it. And I have a hard time with that stuff because to me, I'm still part of me holds on to that cinephile.
Right.
You know, kind of pretentious, like even TV, like, yeah, it's amazing and it looks amazing. But if you really go watch like some 70s movie, you're like, holy crap, you go watch Network or something, you're like, this is a masterpiece. No TV show is even touching this, like not even close. Yeah. Like we kind of forgotten, I think, our perspective of how good some of the old classics are. They're like, movies are movies, you know? And then you watch some show, you're like, yeah, this is a good show, but like it still is kind of like, you don't really need episode 3 because it's filler to get to episode 8 or whatever. And you know, so there's so much of it. It's like, it's awesome because there's more voices, more people can make stuff. You know, we have more opportunities, I think, for filmmakers to get out there. But at the same time, it's like, but your audience is shrinking because, you know, you have your niche audience.
So I'm curious, Colin, how do you filter then? Like you said, there's just so much crap out there, and I'm like, you know, I have kids, and I'm like, God, I really have to be selective on what I watch and spend my time watching. So do you filter things through like genre, or is it director or actor, actress? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely director. It's definitely like, of course I'm going to like see every like Scorsese film. I'll watch every Wes Anderson film. I weirdly don't watch Spielberg movies anymore. I try, and I'm like like the last few Spielberg movies, I'm like, I just don't care about West Side Story. You know what I mean? Like
I think the last one I saw of him was Ready Player One, and before that it was, I can't remember.
I know. I actually have never seen War Horse, and that's I've never seen it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of I haven't. Yeah, that's I mean, after like Minority Report, I was just kind of like, okay, like Spielberg's. I don't know why he's making like Bridge of Spies. Like, who wants to watch these movies? So you know, of course, I love Spielberg. He's amazing, and Jaws and all. They're all masterpieces. But I kind of filter by director and also by my nerdiness of like I watch Mandalorian and stuff. Like I watch, you know, it's like because it's fun to me, and it's you know, honestly, I watch a lot of stuff like Rick and Morty and stuff that I can turn. That's how I turn my brain off. Like watch like cartoons and stuff that are just fun and crazy. But I get frustrated by everyone being like, did you watch this? To me, I'm like, I can't do it. Hurts to watch stuff. Like it's painful. Like it's like a chore. And I'm thinking about all these questions that we're all talking about and that you guys are dissecting regularly on this podcast. Like that stuff's a lot to take on. And like most people don't care. Most people just turn something on and they're texting the whole time while they're watching it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. I think what's going to be happening is because I have a feeling we are probably just past the midway point of the golden age of television.
Sure.
And I think what's going to happen, the reason why everyone started moving to TV was because of shows like Oz or The Sopranos or The Wire. You could do longer form character studies. Yeah. And a lot of actors wanted to gravitate towards that. So now then you get Mad Men, you get Breaking Bad, you have all those shows. Yeah. But it's getting to a point everything is a show. Everything is 5 seasons. Everything is such a huge time suck to be involved in. And I think being able to tell a story, I mean, even movies are getting 3 hours long normally. I mean, Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon is like clocking in at like 4 hours or something like that.
John Wick Chapter 4 was almost 3 hours long.
John Wick Chapter 4 is 3 hours. To where I think it's still shorter than a 5-season show.
Yeah,
and
it's not a 10-hour time
tell
commitment,
a specific story, at least a good character story, I think in 3 hours or less, or even 2 hours, I think that's going to be more valuable because of the amount of volume of content that's getting out there. People just aren't going to have time. And I think people are slowly going to start gravitating towards movie stories again, just because they don't want to have to feel like they have to invest the time. Or if they watch a show on Netflix and Netflix decides to cancel it after a season, well, that's just a season I just wasted. So I think a lot of that might be coming into play here, especially with so many streaming services popping up and all this content needing to be created. I think a shrinking effect may happen, or maybe everyone's just making something. And I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world, or however many that.
Which is why I'm happy Colin's a movie director and I could just watch 3 movies and not, 10 seasons of Law and Order, Criminal Intent.
Yeah, because
to pick his brain.
And that's why, because when we first started this podcast, we were going to we could do TV shows and we could do movies, but doing a TV show, like if it's not complete, it's hard for, at least for me, to talk about it because the story's not complete. I don't know if they stick the landing. I don't.
I mean, it could take a quick, wrong turn, and you're like, we're not into this anymore. Or like you said, Netflix cancels it, and you're like, well, why did we just talk about it then? Yeah.
Or you're predicting what may or may not happen next season, kind of a thing. To where it's almost like talking just for the sake of talking, but to where movies are so finite, you have a product. You can sit and watch it for a couple hours, and then.
So, Collin, I'm curious about getting stuff. When you get stuff greenlit now, is there more of a pressure for getting money to fund or to get the movie going? Is there more of a push for it? Like how are they thinking, is this going to play on Netflix or is this going to play on Hulu? Or streaming, or are they more worried about a theatrical release? Like what is weighted more nowadays?
It's definitely all about the streaming. Theatrical release. Like here's an example. Netflix wanted Animals, and we all were like, no, like because Netflix wasn't Netflix yet when Animals came out. It was, but it just made the transition into actual. Like I remember being like, why is it called Netflix? Why isn't it called Mailflix? Like I'm getting these in the mail. Like I was so dumb I didn't realize how big it was going to be. That the whole point is it's streaming, and I remember we kind of we're like, we want it to go to theaters. We want Animals to play even if it's just a few art house theaters. Like that's the whole point. So we held out and had it go to theaters, and then Showtime took it, and then eventually it was on Hulu. But it's very quickly that was only on Animals. The other 2 movies, especially Gunfight, it's just all about. We got a mini theatrical release for both of them, and AMC actually was part of the plan, which was cool for Gunfight to have it play at some of the AMCs. But it still was just that was just a little gimmick. Like it's all about who's going to take it, and it was about Lionsgate getting it to a certain platform, and which eventually was Hulu. But at the beginning now, going into as a movie's getting greenlit, it's all about where do you think this is going to play, what audience, for most likely not in theaters, and which is fine. Like I'm all for getting as many eyes on it nowadays. Before I was like I want to be at the theaters. But now it's I just want the most eyes on it, really. But that's always the conversation of what selling it at a flat rate kind of price to a Netflix or whatever, and then they have the contract is it's on there for 2 years or whatever the turnaround is, and it's all it's still the Wild West, figuring it all out.
So, having said that, now say for your next project, How soon are you aware if it's going to get a theatrical release or if it's going to be a streaming movie? And the reason why I ask that, because if you know it's going to be a streaming movie ahead of time, are you going to shoot it differently so that way it comes across better on TV and smaller devices as opposed to theaters?
I think
would there be a difference?
No matter what, I will always try to shoot a theater. I always shoot can we get it as wide, you know, anamorphic looking as, I don't care. Let's just put the black
Lawrence
bars.
of Arabia.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want it as skinny as possible, no matter what. And I always luckily win that argument, because luckily that's the stuff I think people are going to push back on and no one cares. And I'm like, well, I care, so I want it to be that. But yeah, so I think it never comes up. What's weird about my 3 movies and all of them so far is that we're going into it without a distribution plan, hoping that the movie's good enough that someone will want it. So what's really weird is at this level, if this was like 20 years ago and I'm doing the exact same thing, let's say, it would not be that way. It would be like by now, my 3rd movie, and especially my 4th movie, a company would have a kind of pre-sold, pre-packaged idea of what they're doing. Like, yeah, there's talks of that. There's always like talks of the pre-sale of how it's going to be, you know, what the plan is, but it still just feels up in the air until the movie's done. And then the movie's done and you're like, okay, I hope is this a festival movie? Or like Gunfight didn't feel like a festival movie. Plus COVID hit, so there were no festivals. But even without that, we were going to go straight to like a Lionsgate to put it on to like a Hulu. We weren't even going to do a festival circuit. Whereas Animals and All Creatures, we knew no one would really necessarily want it unless we showed that it was a festival movie. You know, it's like a festival baby. So it's like really now even with the budgets getting bigger, the talk, and this is why I'm saying nobody cares in a way. Like what you can do is it's kind of freeing. Even with like a $5 million budget or a $10 million budget, it still feels like everyone's treating it like a $200,000. This is just a micro budget. We don't
drop in a bucket.
Yeah, drop in a bucket. Let's see what happens. Maybe someone will take it. So in a way, that's freeing because you're like, wow, there's no pressure. Like I just pretend I'm making a $200,000 movie, but
that's
at the end
a good
of the
point.
day,
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you hope someone you hope it ends up on one of these platforms and not just on YouTube.
Because I mean, are those producers then thinking, okay, I have 10 movies that are $5 million, and if long as one of them busts out, then I make my money back. So it's kind of like having a bunch of, not all your eggs in one basket per se.
Diversifying their portfolio.
Yeah, diversifying your portfolio.
Yeah, that's it. That's totally it. Like it's kind of like 1 out of the 5 or 1 out of 4. Let's say their slate of movies each year is like they do 5 of them. One of them is has like some bigger actor, and then one that is a smaller budget, so they can kind of let those people just go do something. And one's a horror movie, so that's a genre thing, so they know that'll fit somewhere. Like they kind of ratchet it off that way, I feel like. But yeah, it's still kind of like that's exactly it. Hoping one sticks, hoping one makes some money back or something, or at least gets sold or whatever. So yeah, I try not to think about any of that stuff anymore. I used to think about all that, and now I'm just like, I just want to make the movie. I just want to make the movie and be in the moment and let them think about that. Of course, you partake in the conversations and you give your 2 cents, but it all changes as the movie is being made. So it's like, I don't know, like it's everything's just so. It's like no one knows what they're doing anymore. Like no one knows how to. That's because you can put a big person in your movie and it doesn't mean anything. It's like, yeah, for some reason that's still the criteria. That's like the slow part of getting my movies made now. Still, the new movie I'm working on is casting and stuff. It's like you go through all these A-list casts, you get it to them, you get it to their team, they take a month, then they pass on it. Like casting is the worst phase ever because you're just waiting on someone to say no, and they say no, and you're like, did they even look at it? I don't know. But the money people wanted you to get it to that person, so you whittle your way down to like the C-list version of that A-list actor.
It kind of sounds like a little bit like Moneyball, where you have the producers still, they're the old time baseball scouts, and they think, he's got an ugly girlfriend, so he has no confidence. So they still say, oh, we need a star. Well, no, story is probably king more than ever.
Sure,
because you can have massive movies, but a lot of them I feel like fall flat, or at least the story's just not there. Maybe because they're competing with coming out with all this other content that's simultaneously coming out at all times. But,
no, that's honestly, that is the perfect comparison. I think Moneyball, that's it. Like that's the world it's in right now. It's all being figured out still, but it's like we're in this Moneyball situation with how movies are being made, and it's all a mess. Like it's like two clashing styles of the young generation. And because back in the day, like when Spielberg and them got to do everything, like the same thing was happening. Like the studio industry was kind of like falling apart. All these big like spectacle musicals were no one was caring anymore.
Westerns were dying.
Yeah, westerns were dying, and then all these young people came in, and the studios were like ran by like mob bosses and stuff. So like, we don't care, like spend money on these people, you know. And that's why Spielberg and these guys got to do this stuff and try things, and I think that's the audiences were craving something real and grounded that reflected their world. They didn't want song and dance and westerns, and so like it's always about figuring out, okay, well, what is it then? What is? It's always about the story and the audience and what they want. And for some reason, the way the movies are made, that's the last thing that's talked about in the process of making the movie. It's very frustrating.
And you can tell on a lot of stuff that comes out.
Yeah, it's definitely the last thing.
Unfortunately.
So Collin, you mentioned that you're working on a new project, and I think you said it's M. Night Shyamalan vibes. Like, are you allowed to talk about like anything?
Yeah, this one I
upcoming...
can. Yeah, because I have two going. They're both the same size budget. It's just a matter of which one goes first. One is from Spyglass, but so it's literally Spyglass Entertainment. So it's like the first one that is kind of being nurtured by a little production company, but at the same time, we're hitting so many walls, and it's all casting, and it's I don't know what's happening with it. So that movie's kind of been frozen, I feel like, which is fine. The writers of 10 Cloverfield Lane, that movie, if you remember that movie, they wrote it. And it's been a cool process getting to know them and getting to know the guys at Spyglass, but at the same time, that's a whole frozen thing that's not moving right now, which is fine. So I'm kind of shifting over to the other one, which is a little more independent, but it's the same budget, and it's a lot of the same producers that I worked with on Die in a Gunfight. A lot of the ones that I really vibed well with in Toronto, and that's the one that I'm really excited about. And it's a team of people from Kansas City that I met when I was shooting All Creatures, who had a script about, I won't say too much about it. It's basically, I'll just say it's a very the Village meets maybe like A Quiet Place or something. So it's in a vein of those types of movies, a thriller, but I think it lends itself to my style of that kind of gritty, grounded world, really leaning into hopefully the
your
characters.
Sensibilities.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, but with this kind of, like I was saying, with the kind of a genre-y heightened element to it. So yeah, that's the one that we're casting, and it's the same budget, but I think because it's a genre movie, we can hopefully get away with not having to cast like what they think, Tom Cruise or whoever they think needs to be in the movie.
Sure.
I hope, but yeah, so that's all I can really say, I guess. But we'll see. Like, fast forward a year, I might be shooting. The goal is to shoot this year. One of them, that one actually, by August, September. But we're hitting the point where I don't think it's going to happen this year. But that's okay. Like, I think it can still happen next year.
Awesome.
It's just a slow. Literally, one thing gets done every 2 weeks. Like, one correspondence happens probably every 2 weeks. So like, at that rate, that's why it takes 3 years to like get something going. No matter what you do, you can push as hard as you want. And I feel like nothing, just short of me grabbing a camera and being like, hey guys, like Matt, Jay, we're going to film. Like, that's the only way you can literally get something done. So that's why the appeal of just going to make a $200,000 movie is still so intriguing. Because it's like, man, I think you can make, it's better to pump out 5 of those, than wait around for 3 years trying to get.
Yeah. I was just thinking, just based on everything you've been talking about, it's like 95% of movie making is not making the movie. Yeah,
exactly. It's rough.
It's just lining things up.
What's your day job? I mean, in between these projects,
it's all. I mean, Gunfight helped me coast a little, and thank God, because of COVID, like no one was working out here. But otherwise, I'm literally doing random editing gigs. Like, for a while, I worked for a company that worked for NBC, and like it's all like promo type. I would do stuff like, the things that they're like, check out this Sunday, like stuff like that. And it was cool. It pays well and it's great. And now I've been doing a lot more freelance stuff. So like I can kind of choose projects based on, okay, this one will be busy, keep me busy for 2 weeks and let me coast for the next 2 weeks. So it's still very stressful. Like I honestly it's getting harder the older I get to be like budgeting out kind of, okay, I can do this gig that'll get me through a month. And then, what's coming next kind of thing. It's still this paycheck to paycheck vibe. So that's why I'm one of my, some of my advice for anyone who's really trying to get into it, it's like, learn how to edit, because that's the only thing that everyone needs an editor, and it's the only thing that pays. Like, it's the only thing you can show up and they actually pay you the rates you deserve, and they're not trying to cut corners for some reason. Whereas if you're the PA, they're like, I can only get you the rate of 50 today, and you're just cleaning up garbage, and it's great. You need to do that too, but like, at least editing, you're getting paid an editor's rate, and you kind of get it. It's not as soul sucking, I guess. So I do that a lot, and trying to think.
Do you see yourself enjoying editing to the point that you would like to do that for larger productions, or are you still gravitating, at least now, for directing still?
Yeah, I fully directing. Like, there's no way I can, like, I deliberately choose editing projects based on the smallest, least amount of pressure. Like, I just do it to pay money, like, to make money and pay the bills, because I don't see myself, like, I don't want to edit other people's work, or like, I want to do dumb, stupid things that I don't have to think that much and just piece them together to get by. And then in theory, have these, I mean, the next movie I do, I'll finally be in the DGA. Like, I'll have I have all my stuff to be in the DGA and all that. And with that will come, like, you know, proper health insurance and stuff that'll be a little more stable. And I'll be on lists if I want to, like, direct TV shows, and, you know,
Gotcha.
Even if it's just small stuff, just that. So there, in theory, I'll be making solid money as a working director in a way, and then doing my movies as, you know, like my passion projects. And if those become big, you know, studio movies, that's cool too. You know, I'm down to follow that path for sure.
What you said, you had all of the stuff for your DGA kind of set. What's required to become a member? It's
a number of hours on set, and a lot of people in the DGA come up through, like, being actual like first, you know, assistant director, and basically the AD team, which I don't do any of that, like managing the set, and, you know, that's how they get their hours to be, you know, like set hours to qualify. And then on top of that, you have to pay, I think it's like a $13,000 payment at the beginning with those hours. So it's a lot, but that would come out of my salary for the next movie. So it's worth it, because the stuff that comes with it, it's like worth it. But it's just
DGA's Directors Guild.
Yeah, sorry, Directors Guild. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the Writers Guild, right?
Yeah, Writers Guild and SAG, the, you know, actors.
Yeah.
So I think I'm close enough. I might as well just follow through with that and get in there and see what job opportunities, because I've never pursued the, like, commercial directing world. I've never directed commercials to pay bills, and for whatever reason, editing has been just the easier route for me and less mentally and physically demanding. But yeah, like I said, it's getting tougher. But at the same time, each project I'm getting, you know, the salary is getting bigger, and, you know, it seems like, oh, cool, you're getting paid a ton of money, but it's like, well, this is kind of the 3 years. It really evens out. And then it's me being smart enough, you know, having to be
taxes
smart
and everything else.
Paying Dave his 10%.
That's right.
But like,
can't forget about Dave.
I mean, yeah, for real, exactly. Like, paying all that stuff, it like doesn't go far. It does, but like, but yeah, it's a matter of knowing, like, okay, I need to make this last for the next 3 years or 2 years or whatever, which is what I did from Gunfight, and it seemed cool at the time, but now I'm like, okay, those 3 years are up. So it's like, it's like scrambling to get the next thing going, but it's I don't know, it's working so far. Like, each one's, I'm climbing that ladder, but it's just funny how the system is changing so much with it that it feels like you're spinning. Like, if this was 20 years ago, I swear I don't want to say I'd be rich, but I would be. I think I would be selling Gunfight to Lionsgate. I would have made a big, I didn't get anything. You know, it's kind of like, you want Lionsgate on your, you know, at the beginning of your movie? You're like, yeah. It's like, well, that's the payment. You know, it's like, whereas before you get your salary and royalties. Instead now it's like, no, it's just on the platform now. And so it's like, it's a bummer that the cusp, I'm like, I'm riding that. It's like climbing up to becoming the CEO of a company, but you're still being paid the starting fee. It's like, because you're like, that's exactly what it is. It's like, you're climbing the ladder, but the pay is barely going up with it. So it's tricky.
I think it's interesting because a lot of things you've said during this podcast, I can draw parallels to I've worked at news stations. I work at a manufacturing facility currently. I do marketing for them, but it's all the same bullshit. It's like people making decisions but not really caring, or they're not. I mean, they're worried about their own shit that they got going on, and then shit's falling by the wayside over here to where maybe they're not caring about the product, whether that's a movie or whatever the company's making.
Right. They're only worried about their little niche. They're not worried about the overall. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you.
It's funny how it's all the same. It's kind of the same boat, and I guess it's just up to us to figure out how to navigate through that. And I don't know, it's very strange, but it is what it is.
All right, Collin.
Cool, guys.
We're gonna wrap it up here. I have one last question for you.
Go for it.
And since we are a movie podcast, we need your opinion on something. We might actually talk about it on the next episode. So what do you think is the most overrated film ever made, and why is it Shawshank Redemption?
Exactly.
That's right. You guys did mention that. You know what's funny about that year? I think Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump are majorly overrated films.
And there you go.
That's so funny. That's a hard question, honestly.
Okay. All right.
I'll say this.
I added that in there just to rib Matt.
Yeah, because Shawshank's my favorite movie. Yeah.
No way, is it really? Wow. I love the score.
It is.
The Shawshank Redemption score is amazing to me. I love that score, and I kind of miss like 90s, scores where the music swells up. And but I understand why you say it's overrated. My brother would totally agree with that. I love Shawshank Redemption, but I also think like Pulp Fiction was the best movie of that year.
It's a great movie. Yeah.
Of 94 or whatever that year was. Actually, Lion King might have been like the best movie of that year. But know what I think is overrated and everyone hates me for it? I think Annie Hall is overrated.
Oh.
And I think Star Wars did way more for cinema than Annie Hall. So it's
that's one of those. That's another instance of Crash winning Best Picture. Yeah. And where it should have been Brokeback Mountain, and then you have Annie Hall winning when it should have been Star Wars. It's like, and again, I think they've talked about this. Like, it's almost like we should give the Oscar like 5 or 10 years after. We should be 5 years behind on the Oscar award to be like, who deserves this? But I don't know. There's a lot of movies I think are overrated, but I also I watch a lot of garbage too that I think is awesome, that is terrible.
Right. Yeah.
I like it for my own reasons.
Well, I mean, I'm happy you said Annie Hall, because I agree. I think Woody Allen is maybe the most overrated director. Yeah, I really don't like his movies all that much. I think Match Point is the only one I really enjoy.
I know, Match Point's my favorite. I love Match Point.
I like Match Point. Annie Hall I've only seen once in college. I remember enjoying it and thinking it was funny, but it was different at the time when I saw it.
Sure.
And no one really talks about it anymore.
Yeah.
So
right.
But yeah, Match Point I like, but I mean, Woody Allen, at least he was a director that just like churned them out. It's like year after year.
He still does.
Yeah.
Does he?
Impressive.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, one a year.
And it's like once every 7 movies that he does, then he's in the spotlight again, because it registered with like a lot of people in the audience, and it's just weird. But it's like one of those. Yeah, his batting average is not very high for me either.
It's very
just
low.
pumps them out. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But Collin, thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you for hanging out with us and guiding us through the murky world of independent filmmaking, and really kind of zeroing in on your films, and just kind of walking us through that process and giving us a lot of insight. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
So thank you very, very much.
Absolutely, Don. Thank you for having me, and I was happy to do it. And you guys I love this. I could talk about this obviously for hours with you guys. So I appreciate you having me on. And I don't get to talk about this stuff that much, surprisingly. So
well, yeah, Collin, and we'll keep in touch. And if your new movie comes out, we want to talk about it. We'll have you on again. And hell, if you're bored and you want to come on as a guest, we'll talk about whatever. Me and Jay love talking about random shit.
You come home and you want to go to the 70s basement for the with the wood paneling for an
absolutely.
episode.
Oh, I took note of that basement. Don't worry. Yeah, no. When I'm home next, I'll let you know for sure. And definitely when my next movie comes out, I'll keep you guys updated, and we can talk about it as much or as little as you want.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thank you very much, Collin.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Thank you, Matt.
Join us next time as we discuss another hidden gem, 2015's comedy horror fantasy film, The Final Girls. And as always, comment on our episodes at acastwithnoname.com or shoot us an email. Listen to our past library. And if you enjoyed the show, leave us a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help kind of boost the algorithm, if you will. So,
Until next time, Jay.
till next time, Matt.